Welcome to the Dan Norton Show, on which I promote Ayn Rand's philosophy of Objectivism, a philosophy of reason, egoism, and capitalism. It is Thursday, June 18th, 2026. It has been a week since I did my last live stream, which is longer than usual. Oh, I see. I had the wrong mic. I think I just fixed that. Okay. Usually I stream once every 5 days, but it's been an entire week. And that's because I have started streaming on TikTok more. I did a stream on TikTok on Monday and also yesterday. And I'm thinking about doing another one today. So we'll see how it goes. And the reason I've been motivated to stream a lot on TikTok is that I've gotten a large audience over there. So I had I think around 90 people at the peak yesterday, and the first time, well, not the first time I streamed there, but the first major time I streamed there, my first big splash, as I called it, was over 150 people. So I really like getting those kinds of numbers. So that incentivizes me to spend more time on TikTok. But I also want to make money at this, and I have been making more money at YouTube. So I want to keep that going as well. This is a interactive show. So if you want to call in and discuss something, you can use the number on my background, 657-233-0878, or there's a Zoom link in the description. All right, so I wonder if people got out of the habit of hearing my show, because there are fewer people now than I think there are usually at this time. But there hasn't been that much of a difference. It's been 7 days instead of 5 days since my last stream. I was thinking about setting a dollar amount goal to achieve here per hour, and if I meet that, then I'll continue streaming. Excuse me. Otherwise, maybe I'll go over to TikTok. So I thought maybe I could set a goal like $10 or $20 per hour here for YouTube. And if I meet that goal, I can just continue on YouTube. Otherwise, maybe I'll just go over to TikTok. Okay, I don't see anyone here now to raise any chats. So I'm just talking to myself right now. But this show is largely driven by interaction, and now is a good time to raise the chat since you don't have any competition. I will be able to address your chat. Another difference between YouTube and TikTok is that I need moderators on TikTok. Excuse me. Just want to get a cough drop. the chat is much more active on TikTok, and sometimes people will say things in the chat that can get my stream flagged for hate speech. And that actually happened a couple streams ago. I got a warning box popped up in the middle of my screen while I was live streaming on TikTok, saying that this stream has been flagged for hate speech or something like that. And I don't think it was because of anything I said, but probably it was because of something someone had typed in the chat. I don't know if it was a racial slur or what, but some words and topics are pretty sensitive over there on TikTok. Even the word abortion, I've heard, is some people say AB instead of abortion because I guess that can be a sensitive topic, and TikTok's AI will be alerted or something. I don't know exactly how it works, but anyways, when I'm on a call, it's hard for me to also look at the chat. So people will call in on TikTok sometimes, and I can't simultaneously look at the chat, at least if the chat is very, very fast. So if there are a lot of people doing lots of chats, which often happens on TikTok, I can't keep an eye on it. I can't keep track of it all, and also pay attention to the conversation I'm having with the person who called in. So I asked if anyone would volunteer to be a moderator, and a few people did. So I've got a few moderators over there on TikTok. YouTube chat is slower, so I can keep an eye on it myself, and maybe I think it might be less sensitive about flagging streams. I mean, I've never got a flag on YouTube, and I've been doing it for over a year, and I've only been doing TikTok for a couple weeks, and I already got one flag. So I think it's a more sensitive platform to certain topics. I've also thought about streaming simultaneously on TikTok and YouTube, but I think I need to have at least 1,000 followers on TikTok before I can do that. That's what I read. I think I need to have at least... Now there's ways around that. Like I could just share a window. Like I guess I could start up a TikTok live app or live studio app right now and share that window in YouTube. Or maybe share the YouTube window in TikTok. And the way it works technically is different than how it would work if I had 1,000 subscribers or followers on TikTok. But so I think there is a way I could do it, but I'm not sure. Well, for one thing, I think it might slow my computer down too much to be doing 2 live streams at once. Maybe not. I'm not sure. I could experiment with that, and maybe I will at some point. But for the moment, I'm just streaming on one platform at a time. I see somebody gave the stream a like. I'm going to do that again as well myself. That'll help promote it in the algorithm. I haven't done as much reading between this stream and the last as I have done between previous live streams on YouTube, because I've been busy with TikTok and some other things. So I don't have much by way of a reading update for you. So sometimes I do reading updates. So I don't have a preset list of topics I go through. I usually am just relying on people who show up here to raise topics or ask questions. Does anyone want to be the first chatter of the day? Oh, one thing I was curious about is whether you all use TikTok. I wonder how many of my YouTube viewers also use TikTok. Maybe I should do a poll right now in the chat, and also start a super chat goal. Let me do that. All right, I'm going to start a super chat goal for 5 super chats of any amount in the next 3 hours. I don't know if I'm going to go 3 hours today, but that's at least what I'm going to set for the goal. Okay, I just started the goal. And let me also start a poll asking whether people use TikTok. Use yes, no are the only options. Let's see, should I add any options? I'll just go with that for now. Okay. I just started that poll, so you can now vote on that in the chat. I did upload my first major TikTok live stream to YouTube. I don't know if you all saw that, but you can get a little flavor of how it went, how it goes over there. That's the most recent video I've posted in the video section of my channel. I titled it Ayn Rand fan makes his first big splash in the world of TikTok debate. There's actually another title which you might have seen. So there's something in YouTube called A/B testing. You can test out different titles and see which one works best in the algorithm. And I did that for the first time on my latest video. So there's one version of the video is titled what I just said, Ayn Rand fan makes his first big splash in the world of TikTok debate. And the other title is my first big splash. Not Ayn Rand fan's first big splash, but my first big splash. And so far, the test has said that around 85% there's been 85% of the watch time I've gotten on that video has come from the first title, Ayn Rand fan makes his first big splash. And only 15% of the watch time has come from the other title, my first big splash. So there's a pretty large discrepancy there. So maybe I will end the test runs for 2 weeks, and then YouTube, it defaults to whichever one won in terms of how much watch time it got. So I guess it'll default to the Ayn Rand fan version instead of the my version. Maybe I can show this on screen. It might be a little more clear what I'm talking about. Somebody voted, thank you. on the poll. Okay, I'll share this. In just a sec. Okay, now you can see it. So this is the test I was talking about, the A-B test. There's the version A and version B. So you can try out different titles, and the first version of the title is this: Ayn Rand fan makes his first big splash. The second version of the title says, my first big splash in the world of TikTok debate. And you can see the vast majority of the watch time has come from this version. So for some reason, this title is much more engaging for people. And the test, it's been running for 8 days and 17 hours. And it's going to run for 2 weeks before the test ends. I could end it now if I wanted to, but I think I might just ride it out and then go with this title. So I wonder which... Now, I think for a given user, you only see one of these. So if this video showed up in your feed, I wonder how many of you saw the A version versus the B version. Oh, Ghosty is here. Hi, Ghosty. He says, wishing you the best. Thank you. Same to you. Good news. A major Moscow oil refinery was hit in a Ukrainian drone attack. Oh, all right. I haven't been following the news, so I didn't hear about that. I do hope Ukraine prevails in this war. It's been going on for over 4 years now. Well, I'm glad if that helps Ukraine win. Thanks for that update. Ghosty is one of my European listeners in the Netherlands, I believe. So it's after midnight your time, right? I think you're, what is it, 8 hours ahead? Oh, 9 hours ahead of me. I'm in Pacific time, so it's 1:33 a.m. your time. All right, so Ghosty was the first chatter of the day. All right, so we got a few more people here. Anyone want to raise a topic? Or ask a question? Yaron Brook show is much more news focused than mine is. So I don't know if Yaron mentioned that on his show. This attack on the Moscow oil refinery. I'm going to take a look at my analytics here. Okay. 18 people have come by so far. Well, maybe I could tell you some about my TikTok debates. At least until I see some more chats here. So just, was it yesterday? Yeah, yesterday I did a stream on TikTok. And probably took about 4 calls. And one of the calls in particular got a lot of attention. I think around 90 people came by. I think that's because the person I took a call from had a large following. I think it might have been around 8,000 followers on TikTok. So that was probably the most exciting part of the stream. I see someone else just came in the chat here. What do you think of Schubert? I like Schubert, at least some of his music. I haven't listened to Schubert in a while, but there have been certain phases in my life where I listen to classical music more. Oh, I didn't realize I was showing that. I should show my chat window instead of this window. There we go. And then let me refresh it so it shows the most recent chats. Let's see. Oh, it's showing up now. So I've had phases where I've listened to more classical music than I listen to right now, and I've listened to some Schubert, and I like Schubert. He's one of the Romantic composers from 19th century, I believe. And I like those. I like that era of music, the Romantic composers. I'm not super familiar with Schubert. I couldn't name his most popular pieces, but I do know that I like him as a composer in the Romantic genre generally. I guess you like Schubert. You've got looks like your profile picture is a image of Schubert. Have you been here before? I think for some reason your name looks a little familiar. Franz Schubert. I love Schubert. I recommend his Lieder. Okay. Lieder is just the German word for song, right? Maybe it has some more specific meaning, though. All right. What else? This is a listener-driven show, so I don't come with a lot of material prepared here. So I rely on you all to raise topics or ask questions or call in. You say yes. I guess leader means song. Okay. And some topics I have more to say about than others. So a couple topics have been raised. Ghosty mentioned some news, and Schubert has mentioned Schubert. His username is also Schubert, not just his profile picture. So he's got Schubert both in his YouTube handle and his image. So Schubert mentioned Schubert. But I don't have a lot to say about Schubert or the Ukraine news. So I don't always have a lot to say about something. All right, so you got some more votes on the poll. Now 4 votes. 3 people say no. 1 person says yes to the question, do they use TikTok? Oh, somebody just called? Oh, I'm sorry. Why I didn't hear that? Because I had the do not disturb turned on. I guess I did that the last time I did a live stream, and I didn't turn off the do not disturb, so I didn't hear it when it first came in. But I see you left a voicemail. Okay, yeah. So if you call back in, I should hear it. You want to try again? I could also call you back. Okay, now I hear it ringing. Hello. Okay, sure. Let me just turn your audio on so YouTube can hear you. Just give me a moment. All right, so I got a call from Dan, and he is interested in talking about Israel. So let me just turn on the audio so everybody can hear him. Okay, one more. I've got a few different scenes here I have to cycle through in order to make sure you're audible. Okay, so go ahead, Dan. You can state your question for the audience.
I mean, I was just curious why you seem to support Israel, and I wanted you to make a case for it.
Okay, so I support Israel because I think it's a rights-respecting country. Not perfectly,
Yeah.
but at least relative to many countries in the world, I think it's relatively respecting of people's rights. It's not a dictatorship, as I think is is the case for many of the surrounding countries who have attacked Israel. And I wanted to show some support for Israel because I think it is a relatively good country, and also because it's unjustly smeared, in my view.
hmm
So that's why I have it in the good list. I wanted to show it some support.
Yeah, I mean, as far as it being rights respecting, I mean, the obvious thing I have to ask you about is the Palestinians, right? I think maybe, I mean, not even just the ongoing war, but just like for years and years now, it's been called an apartheid state, and I think that label is pretty justified, especially when we look at like the West Bank, where like Palestinians in West Bank like live under fundamentally different rights than do Israelis, right? Like their movement is limited, for example. Their ability to like construct homes is really limited. So, I mean, in a lot of cases, just as one example, there's like a really stringent permit system that you need to like start building like houses, and so some of them are forced to do without a permit, and then those houses get like bulldozed somewhat routinely. And then obviously at the same time, there's sort of like the imposition of like Israeli settlers that are coming in on like I don't what almost anyone would consider is not their land, taking it.
Okay, a lot of cases of rights violations. We
Mhm.
could. Okay, I just wanted to repeat that because I think I accidentally turned off your audio for just a couple seconds.
Sure. Okay.
Okay, so I'll start by saying I'm not an Israel expert, someone who knows a lot more about this than I do, who is much more knowledgeable,
Yeah.
and also a pro Ayn Rand YouTuber is Yaron Brook, and
Uh-huh.
he's discussed it a lot. But I'll say what I can from my limited
Yeah.
knowledge. So I don't think everything Israel does is necessarily good, but
Mhm.
what I have heard is that there are some extremist religious fanatics, maybe in
Mhm.
the West Bank, and they have done some things which are not justified according to my
Mhm.
principles.
Mhm.
So I wouldn't necessarily defend everything that has been done, but I will say
Yeah.
that if there's a region that's from which terrorists have been attacking Israel, whether that's the West Bank or Gaza, I think
Mhm.
Israel is justified in the name of self-defense to
Mhm.
take some kind of measures to protect itself. So I think there have
Yeah.
been, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is there have been some threats by terrorists in from coming from the West Bank. So maybe it's appropriate to put on some more restrictive
Uh,
measures there.
I wouldn't really say so. Yeah, I mean, like the terrorism activity is obviously like mostly in Gaza. There's some violence in the West Bank, but there's also a lot of settler violence in the West Bank, like that like happens routinely. And like Palestinians in the West Bank are like not protected by the IDF that's there. Like the IDF will and you can Google there's so many cases of this where there's like settlers that attack Palestinians there. But yeah, like obviously it's like another rights violation, right? I think the if if Israel's going to come in and sort of like essentially administer control over that territory, then they probably at least have like some duty to protect the Palestinians there. They do not. I guess the other thing I was going to ask you about is like you seem like a libertarian. And I'm going to unfortunately take the liberty of maybe like assuming like an opinion that you have, which that a lot of libertarians share, which is sort of the U.S. wars on terror. I'm sure you are like against them, and I think one of the good points against the U.S. campaigns on terror that you could dispute if you want, if you happen to disagree with this, is that they make the United States less safe. In fact, they breed like more terrorism, right? Because we go over, we kind of like fuck up these countries. We create a lot of enemies for ourselves, and like we behave in ways that directly contribute to the growth of terrorist groups. And I think, if you share that opinion, I think it should be pretty easy to see how the exact same thing applies to Israel, where they haven't really been sort of, their actions haven't really been conducive to peace at all, right? Because I guess like one thing to consider is if you think about it from like the Palestinian perspective, or like especially I guess if we compare sort of like the West Bank and Gaza, and sorry, I hope I'm not like meandering too long, where like Gaza you have a significant amount of terrorist activity. In the West Bank you do not, but peace has gotten them nothing in the West Bank. If you look at sort of a map of the West Bank over time, they've only continued to lose territory, right? They've only continued to basically like live in this like second class state over decades and decades, and their lives have gotten worse. And this is the region where it's like relatively peaceful. So you have that, right? Like that. I think sort of people see that. And then it like motivates them to join terrorist groups like Hamas because like this, this is the only way sort of to get back our dignity and our land. And like the war right now, right? Like I mean, like you could, I mean, obviously, I guess you could say that like Israel had to respond immediately after October 7th. I would say that like sort of like Israel kind of contributed to like bring the conflict to that boiling point in the first place, and in the same way that the U.S. did with the war on terror. But yeah, I think Israel is kind of responsible for endangering itself, but also Jews abroad is another thing I would say. But so like, yeah, go ahead. I think I probably talked too long.
All right. Well, there's a lot there, and there's one point I'll make is I don't call myself a libertarian, and I think that's foreign policy is one area, at least one area, in which my views differ. I think differ significantly from a
Hmm.
lot of libertarian views. Like I think many libertarians are anti-war. At least that's the impression I
Hmm.
get. And I'm not
Hmm.
anti-war. I just
Oh,
think
okay.
war should be just, but
Yeah.
what that means exactly, that's the discussion to have. I think a war of self-defense is good. I'm not opposed to that.
Yeah.
And my understanding is that Israel has been unjustly attacked,
Hmm.
and it's therefore justified in taking some kind of countermeasures.
Yeah.
And I mean, we could. I've looked into the history of Israel somewhat. Like
Sure.
I've read about the 1948 war and the 1967 war
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
some others. And my impression is that Israel has been unfairly attacked, and
Yeah.
so it is justified in engaging in some kind of self defense.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you see. I mean, the first thing before I say this, I want to clarify. I think any activity that targets civilians in any way is unjust. But I, do you think that there is sort of any justification, like a self-defense justification on the Palestinian side? Because from their perspective, they're occupied by this foreign power. Um, they're even like long before this war started, Gaza had been considered unlivable by the UN. It didn't even have like safe drinking water. Um, there's like a number of different ways that where like like their you could say that their rights are being violated. They're being like subjugated, exposed to violence, and like any number of sort of reasons that I think would justify like fighting back essentially like against like this imperial power. Like I would also view that as like a form of self-defense.
Well, I know that Hamas in its charter, the 1988 charter,
Hmm.
calls for the extermination of Israel. Basically, I
Hmm.
think that's their goal. And I've heard
Yeah.
that polls of Palestinians show
Hmm.
that a majority of them support Hamas. So
Hmm.
if these are people who want your state to be annihilated, then
Hmm.
at least some of them seem to
Yeah.
be a threat. Now,
Yeah, Hamas is bad. But I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead, please.
I don't that these are recent polls. Like if we go back to
Yeah.
1948's, maybe polls would show something different. But
Yeah.
my impression is that this is not something new. It's there's been this, like back in the 20s there were riots and massacres. I
Yeah.
think going on both sides, 20s and the
Hmm.
30s. Um, so there's a long history which Arabs and Jews and
Hmm.
Palestinians have been involved in. So I think to sort
Yeah.
out whether Palestinians have some legitimate grievances, we might have to get into the history some more, and maybe we can do that.
Yeah.
But I'll pause there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm fine getting into the history more. I guess like I want to say like Hamas is bad. I think like any violence that targets civilians uh is really bad. Um,
Well,
but
that's
like
another
I mean
point.
like
Let me just make one other point real quick.
well, okay.
I don't think
Okay.
Israel does target civilians. I think civilians die as collateral
Yeah.
damage, but I don't think they're being targeted.
Okay, I mean, like, I don't know. There's I guess a couple things to say about that. You may not think that, but like, I mean, you can look at like almost any urban war expert, and like they'll tell you like a disproportionate amount of civilians are being killed. You can look at like their own intelligence numbers as reported by the Guardian, and showing like numbers of upward of like to 90%. Like this is like their own estimates in the Israeli military, that of like almost like 90% civilian casualties. That almost never happens even in urban war. Um, and I think the other thing I would bring up, this maybe sort of like the most egregious example, and perhaps the best example that they probably are targeting civilians to some degree, is this Doctors Without Borders survey.
that you can look into, where basically like there were a lot of Doctors Without Borders people working in Gaza. Some of them noticed that there were a unusual number of children with sniper bullet wounds in the head or the heart. And then there was sort of like a survey that was sent out to like a bunch of them, and then like a bunch of these doctors reported the same thing. That's obviously like, and you can look into any of these cases where this wasn't, cases where like there were I don't know, like terrorists right in the air or something, and like the sniper missed. I mean, obviously, if it's a wound to the head or the heart, it's like pretty intentional. But like, I mean, yeah, a lot of these cases where like children, I'm not even saying like 14-year-olds. I'm saying like young children had like sort of like wandered into areas that they weren't supposed to, and then were like sniped out like by Israeli soldiers. I think there's so much evidence that like that you could point to that I'm not even mentioning, that like is very easy to find, that I think would cause almost any reasonable person to believe that they're targeting civilians. And the other thing I wanted to mention is you mentioned Hamas like says in this charter something about like exterminating Israel. I think some people sort of, I mean, I guess I'm not going to get into the weeds of that. I think Hamas is bad. But the other thing I would point to is polls like within Israel that show that they're like a majority, a vast majority of them, like upwards of like around 80% are very comfortable with the way this war is being fought, with all the details that I just said about like the way that civilians are being killed. And also a lot, the majority of them are like comfortable clearing out Gaza at this point, right? And so I think that's maybe where, well, I definitely want to be respectful of you. I get like a little uncomfortable with you sort of like having Israel in the good category and saying like, well, you don't know that much about it, where there's like a very good argument to be made that like genocide is happening at this point, where you have Israel's like probably the most representative democracy on the planet, right? Because it's a single district. It's a single voting district, so it's the closest thing you can get to basically like you 5% of the vote equals 5% of the seats, like closer than anywhere on earth. And you mentioned that there's sort of like these like radical religious extremists. Those are members of like the elected cabinet right now. This isn't just like fringe people going out against the government. Like the government has like often like endorsed some of these settlers' activities. They're the ones that are conducting this war right now, and you can look at statements from them that are I think clearly genocidal, like where I don't know, like Defense Minister like Yoav Galan says like, these are human animals, we're going to turn off all our electricity, and like again like repeatedly sort of like hint at or say like clearing out Gaza. Like I would definitely consider that a genocide, or that seems like obviously like a genocide. Right, or at least ethnic cleansing. I mean, like some people distinguish that. I think, I guess we can get into the genocide question in a bit, but yeah, like I kind of think that, like with you having it in the good category, maybe you have sort of like I would say a duty to just look into some of this stuff a little bit deeper, because it's really fucked up. I think it's the most fucked up thing, maybe, well, aside from like the DRC and Sudan, to like happen in my lifetime.
Okay. Well, I think the genocide charge is a smear.
Okay.
And I had a discussion with someone within the last few weeks about that in particular, and
Yeah.
I asked him to send me a source for the genocide claim, and he sent me something, and I looked into it, and I shared it on my screen. I'm actually sharing my screen right now. I'm taking some notes.
Okay, I actually can't see your screen because there's a delay, and I'm actually just like microwaving dinner. But
okay.
So I won't be able to see anything you're showing.
Okay, I'm just writing some notes to help me keep track of the conversation. Okay. But I did share on screen when I had this conversation before what this guy was quoting, and I didn't think it showed what he claimed it was showing. Sure. And then another conversation I had with somebody else on TikTok within the last couple of weeks, he was also making a genocide or ethnic cleansing claim, and I said, can you give me a source? Oh, his specific claim was that Israel was targeting with their bombs civilians, and I said, I've never heard about this. Can you give me a source? And I said, well, sometimes Israel engages in roof knocking, and they would give people warnings that they're about to bomb
Yeah.
somewhere, which I don't think you would do if your goal was genocide. And he said,
Mm-hmm.
actually, they told people to go to this place, and then
Mm-hmm.
that was supposedly safe,
Yeah.
and then they bombed that place, which
That's
was supposed to
true.
be.
I mean,
And
if
then
you're thinking the same thing
hold
I'm
on,
thinking of.
hold on.
Yeah.
Let me just
Okay.
finish this story.
Yeah.
So I said, can you give me a source for this? And then he
Yeah.
sent me this source, and I looked it up, and there was nothing about
Yeah.
that at all. And then he
Mm-hmm.
eventually said
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
conversation, "Oh, I was being bad faith." So I think he was just
Oh, okay.
bullshitting
Yeah.
the whole time. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
maybe if you give me some sources I could look into, maybe that would be a good path
Sure.
forward here.
I mean, I think the Amnesty International article makes like a really like good succinct claim for genocide. I think I can sort of briefly make my own claim. I think I'm not. There's some people that claim genocide because I think they think that Israel is genuinely maybe trying to like exterminate Palestinians. I see it like maybe a different way. I think I'm maybe from like a more radical camp where like I think that like Israel has been doing genocide since before October 7th. And the reason I think that is I guess I'm thinking of genocide in terms more of like what's happening in like Xinjiang or like like with the Trail of Tears, where I just sort of like I guess the destruction of like a people, I guess as a mass entity. And so like I see like Palestinian or like not even I see like I feel like Palestinian identity is like intimately like connected to the land that they're on. And you can see like time and time again, Israelis say like, oh, there's no such thing as a Palestinian, right? Like they deny that like such an identity like even exists. And then there's also this like sort of like very deliberate and like obvious attempt to sort of like remove this people, right? So like you have this like campaign right now, but is ultimately part of like I would say like a larger effort to get these people off of the land. Right? And I think like it's really obvious that that's what's happening. That the ultimate goal is, with either what's happening with the war right now, and like Netanyahu saying that there will never be a Palestinian state, and then what's happening with the settlements. So like that's like I would constitute like sort of the forced removal of Palestinians like out of Palestine a genocide, like because it's sort of maybe just accentuate the point I made earlier. This idea that there's like no such thing as a Palestinian, and like I think they're kind of like making that come to fruition, if that makes sense.
Okay, one other name I'll throw. I mentioned Yaron Brook before. He knows more about this. One other name.
Yeah.
Have you heard of Nick Matau?
Maybe.
He's a YouTuber. I mean, he's on other platforms too, but he's also much more knowledgeable about this issue than I am. And I think he does debates sometimes. So Matau on YouTube, if you might be interested in checking him out. And he takes the Israeli side. But maybe I thought of him because you mentioned that Netanyahu saying there's not a Palestinian state. And I think I heard, I recall Nick making this sort of point, like that historically there hasn't been a Palestinian state. Like if you go back in history, there's
that's completely true. But yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So the Roman Empire was in control of the region for a while, and then I guess there was a caliphate or multiple caliphates, and then there was a British mandate for a while. And I think in the late 19th century, there were sales of lands, like some Arabs, or maybe you would call them Palestinians. They sold lands to Israelis, and it was. I think there's documentation of these transactions.
Yeah, there is. That gets a little complicated, which I can get into in a second. But yeah, everything you said is true.
So I don't see it as Israel conquering other people's lands. At least in many cases, it seems like there were these voluntary transactions, and they purchased the land. And I think maybe it was Tel Aviv. I've heard it was just previously pretty much a desert, and then Israel created a civilization there where there really wasn't anything before. It wasn't that
Do you mean modern Israel did or ancient Israel?
I think
'Cause, I mean,
the
like, if you
impression
think
I get
modern
is like
Israel, that's like easily disputable. But go ahead, sorry.
like maybe late 19th century or early 20th
Like there was
century.
nothing. Can you clarify what you mean? You say like there wasn't anything there and they built a civilization there.
I can't give you a lot of details. This is where the shortage of
Okay.
my knowledge kicks in. But I've heard
Yeah, I
someone
just
like
don't get why it's
Yaron
on your
Brook.
good column then. Like, because it's like it's like I'm definitely not trying to cross all into being disrespectful, but it's like I feel like I'm bringing some of this stuff up, and then you're like, oh, I don't know, like refer to this person, and it's just like,
Well, I know I've read a lot
yeah,
about Israel, so I'm not omniscient.
yeah,
I'm certainly
yeah,
less informed than other people,
yeah.
but I have spent a lot of time researching it. I think I know enough about
Okay, okay,
Israel to put it
yeah,
in the
yeah,
good
yeah, yeah.
category, even if there's
Sure,
much
sure,
more I
sure.
could learn.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a couple things I would say, about what you're saying. I mean, like first, like, yeah, I mean, like that there wasn't any like formed Palestinian state, but that's also like I don't know. I don't think there was ever like a Kurdish state, like for example, either. Like I think like there was never like a Uyghur state, right? Like I mean, like identities exist, like they exist at like varying times, right? Like some people say like, oh, there used to be no such thing as a Palestinian, right? I mean, I mean, all identities are to some extent like artificial, and then they come into existence, and then some of those identities are not attached to a state. But like I think the identity that like Palestinians have as like Arabs that are like from like the territory of Palestine is just as like valid as like any other type of identity that like we would probably agree is a valid one, right? Or like any other like nation without a state. And then as far as like there's a couple things. I mean, this isn't, I guess, a huge point, but in terms of like Palestinians like selling like Jewish settlers land, totally happened. The one caveat I want to bring up about that is that I think like ownership laws were like really complicated back like when this like a sort of land was like managed by the Ottomans, where you had basically, I guess like I don't know, you could call them like lords or something, but you had like I guess like a minority of people that officially owned much of the land, even though like people like I think were like like living on it, working on it, right, and like they were sort of managing it as if their own land, but like I think like the sort of like the deed and stuff maybe like belonged to someone else. So I think that just makes I guess like the story like a little bit complicated, because I think that there's some people that would say like, oh, like like the Palestinians sold all of their own land, and like now they're like getting upset about what they did, and that wasn't a decision that was like made by like a majority of people that were living on this land, and obviously even if that does happen, like that's totally fine. Like I think maybe the even more important point is I mean Israel has like continued to seize land that is like not theirs according to international law. And like I mean, you can look at sort of like Israel, like how its boundaries and what they're supposed to be when it was originally established, and they've now like far exceeded that, and then like pushed people and like continue to like push people out like off of their land and out of their homes.
okay. I'm trying to think of what the best direction to go is. Well, so
Sure.
one point I was thinking of is I'm an individualist. You mentioned
Yeah.
Palestinian identity. I
Yeah.
think I don't know if there's a kind of collectivist perspective there. Like
Mhm.
I support the rights of individual human beings,
Yeah.
and I don't think that some racial or ethnic group to which you
Mhm.
belong is
Mhm.
fundamental to your identity. Like if you're a black person or a white person or a
Yeah. Yeah.
Chinese
Yeah.
person,
Sure.
I try to look at people as individuals and see whether
Yeah.
their rights are being violated. So I wouldn't say there's such a thing as Palestinian rights or Israeli rights.
Yeah.
There are rights of individual human beings,
Mhm. Mhm.
and we can look at whether an individual
Yeah.
human being's rights are being violated. I think your rights can
Yeah.
only be violated by coercion or force. like
Mhm.
Native Americans, maybe I think that came up. You mentioned the Trail of
Yeah.
Tears earlier. So if there were
Yeah.
peaceful Indians who were not engaged in massacres of the European
Okay.
settlers, then
Yeah.
I would oppose coercing them to move
Yeah.
west, or if they're just peacefully occupying some lands,
What if they
then
weren't?
I I think they should be free to continue to live there. But if they are
Yeah.
engaged in massacres or
Yeah.
initiating force against the Europeans, then I think it would be a justifiable kind of self-defense for the
Yeah.
Europeans
I mean,
to.
I just think it's interesting that like you're saying like collective rights don't exist, but then you're treating these people as a collective in this example, right? Like you're not like prosecuting the actions of individuals, you're prosecuting the responding to the actions of groups at this point, right? Like you're you're sort of saying that like I guess if these I don't know if these tribes are like engaged in massacres, then like like those should be the ones that could like get deported, right? Like when we're talking about like the Trail of Tears, right? So like you're dealing with people in terms of groups and identities anyway. And the other thing I would have to say about that
I don't think
is,
I
I mean,
am, because like what I'm trying to say is, like, if one tribe, like let's say the Cherokees, are
yeah,
engaged in massacres, then I think it would be
yeah,
justified to fight against them. But if some other tribe, like the Sioux, is not,
yeah,
then I don't think it would be justified. So I'm saying it's good to treat them on a case
yeah,
by case basis, an
right. But
individualized
I'm
basis, you
just
might say.
okay. But you're saying individual, like I mean, I guess I was thinking individuals. The reason why I'm getting confused is because you're saying like that. I guess like group rights don't matter, but like you are ultimately sort of dealing with these people, responding to them as a group at that point. Like you're saying like like the Cherokee Indians, right? Even though the Cherokee Indians is composed of like a bunch of different individuals, right? And like you're not dealing with the individuals individually. You're sort of deciding their fate based off of their membership in a group.
Well, I do think war it's a different context. So there are innocent
Okay.
civilian casualties in war,
Sure. Sure.
but I don't think that is the fault there. I think lies on
Yeah.
the aggressive side. Like
Okay. So
if we
do
go to
like
war
collective rights
with
suddenly exist
uh,
in war? Like
if if we go to war with maybe Japan is a
yeah.
good example. World War II, we
Yeah.
drop
Yeah.
a atomic bomb and kill I don't know how many thousands or millions of people, and some of those people
Yeah.
are innocent, like children, very small children.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's tragic. And but that doesn't mean we're being collectivist and dropping the bomb. I think because the purpose of
Mm-hmm.
doing that, as opposed to like a ground invasion, is to spare innocent American lives. The
Mm-hmm.
points, I think, of the proper um, role of the U.S. government is to protect U.S. citizens, including
Yeah.
the lives of U.S. soldiers. And it's not, I don't, it's not like a criminal justice operation where you arrest people
Yeah.
as individuals and you give each person a trial. War is
Yeah.
not like that. It has a collective aspect, like you can't deal with people as
Yeah.
individuals, but that doesn't mean you're being a collectivist and that you think like the individual doesn't matter. It's just that's just the way war works, as opposed to the criminal justice system.
Yeah, but I feel like even in that example, you're talking about the United States like operating as a collective that like you might just not see as like significant, but I see as like very significant, right? Because I think just as like the U.S. government, like the U.S. as an entity, has like sort of an obligation to protect the people inside it. I think this could point to sort of a right of people to collectively associate, even if you see like individual rights as like fundamentally more important. I think people should have the right to sort of like group together, like in an identity or state or whatever they want, and advocate for the rights based off of themselves. And that's like what Palestinians have done, like in the formation of Palestinian identity. And I like Israel sort of refusing to like give them any dignity right now. Like they're being attacked like based off of like I guess you can say like their like identity as like Palestinians, and like not like like losing your access to their land, like losing like their ability to like live any kind of semblance of like normal lives right now. Like there's like I feel like I'm saying almost like the bare minimum of things that they're experiencing right now. And just I think I think I do just want to maybe like really quickly ask you, I guess, in terms of just like I guess like individual and collective rights when it comes to
like identities like that, I'm really interested, I guess, what you would think about like like what China has done with like the Uyghur people or like the Tibetans, right? Where I would say those people's rights have been violated not only as individuals in cases where people are like sort of apprehended and put in camps, but as like collective in a way that like I would say matters. Maybe you disagree. Maybe you would say some of these rights are not important, but like I would say sort of like the collective right to like exist as a people, practice your own language, pass down your traditions, and like sort of like exist as a group, right? So like I guess the question I have for you is like how do you see China's treatment of these groups, like in the context of this discussion that we're having, I guess.
I'm not informed about that. I know almost nothing about that, but I don't think that the Uyghurs, these are Muslims who live in West China. Is that basically?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. Yeah.
So I don't think they have rights qua Muslims. I think they have rights qua individuals. And if they are being mistreated, my objection would be that it's their individual rights that are being overridden, not some alleged rights they have as Uyghurs.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we can move on from this. I guess I would say, like, yeah, this might just be a point of, like, permanent disagreement and, like, just, like, a difference of perspective. Yeah, I would say that there's, like, collective rights being violated, including, like maintenance of, like, their own language, right? Or I think, like, sort of, like, in Tibet, for example, I think the way sort of, I guess you could say, like collective cultural heritage has been attacked, right? Where best example I can think of is you have like the Dalai Lama and like the Panchen Lama in Tibetan Buddhism. Like the Panchen Lama, the guy who's like supposed to be like succeed the Dalai Lama, was like kidnapped, like as a young boy. I think that not only violated this specific individual's rights, but like the collective's rights, because this is a sort of a culturally significant individual, like an immensely culturally significant individual. Some like this lineage goes back thousands of years, and this culture was robbed, right? So I'd say like all the individuals, like as part of this group were robbed. I think that's bad. But we can move on to unless you want to respond to it.
Well, I don't know if it's maybe it's worth digging into this point about whether collectives have rights. I think rights apply to individuals, and collectives don't have rights up over and above the rights of individuals. So if you don't see it that way, maybe I guess we just have a fundamental different understanding of rights.
We do.
And maybe it's worth exploring that. That might affect other issues, like with the Palestinians we were talking about. So
maybe, I mean, I guess we don't have to like. Well, I think it ultimately matters for the discussion of genocide at least a little bit, right? Because like I think like you have to like genocide is a term that only exists in the context of like a group, right? Like it's like specifically it's like trying to like eliminate a certain group of people. Right. Like obviously, if let's just say you kill a bunch of people, like indiscriminately, that's like not necessarily a genocide, like unless like the intention is to sort of like eliminate them, and you can do that in nonviolent ways, right? Like I think that what I just said, and unfortunately, even if you said you weren't super knowledgeable about this, I think again, like what's happened like in Xinjiang is a really good example of this, where there weren't. It's not like China's like systematically exterminating Uyghur people. It's like they stopped them from speaking their language. They stopped them, or like in Tibet, for example, they like take their kids away and like put them in schools.
Well, that sounds violent.
So that they don't. But I guess that the point is like there is like each individual child's rights is violated, or like also the family's rights to like have like control over their own child. But there is sort of like, I guess, that is also like an act of genocide against like the people of Tibet, because it's like threatening their existence as Tibetans, like in order to like exist as a culture, which is like this is like a relevant question in genocide. You have to be able to like pass down stuff into to your children. So this is something that like if you look up the official definition of genocide, like for the United Nations, this is something that they would include, like a case like what's happening in Tibet. So in order to even like approach this question as a genocide, you have to sort of concede some level of collective rights that exist. Otherwise, we can't we can only see it in terms of like microscopic individuals' rights that are being violated. We can't even really have a discussion about genocide.
Okay. I'm trying to think of the best direction here. So here's a thought. So I don't think there's a distinction between genocide and violating people's rights. I don't think every violation of rights is a genocide. Like taxation, I think taxation is a violation of people's rights. It coerces people, but it's not a genocide. And stopping people from using a certain language, maybe that's I guess that is if you're using force to do that. I don't know what happens. Like if someone tries to speak some other language they're not supposed to, then they get fined or jailed. I don't know what the punishment
we
is.
have like real examples of this in America, though. Like of sort of, I think it falls under the specific classifications like linguicide, right? Where this is basically what happened with like Native American boarding schools, where they were taken from the kids, and then they were not able to like sort of learn any of their culture or the language. It was like very deliberately like genocidal.
Well, I wouldn't call that a genocide. Like if people can still exist but they just can't use the language, I think that's bad. I think that's a violation of their rights. But I would not call it a genocide.
Be alive, or do you mean exist as like the group of people? Because like those are different.
Well, maybe we can talk about that, but I just want to make it clear first of all that I think maybe the term is being watered down if you use genocide to refer to ending a certain culture, but the people can still exist. And they just can't speak a certain language. I would not call that a genocide.
I'm just using the UN definition though, which includes stuff like this.
Okay, well, I think the UN is a very corrupt organization.
Okay, the UN might be corrupt, but do you realize that that's like the only reason we have the term genocide exists was like people like got together like at the UN like Nuremberg trial, like it comes from like the Holocaust, and like without like I think I'm maybe speaking like as closely to like the original conception of the word as you can, because these are the people who defined like what it was.
Okay, well, we can look it up, or I can look it up, and I'm not
like the UN
very familiar on the history of the term and its etymology.
Well, but it comes from the Holocaust, right? Like that's like
well, I think that's the primary example of a genocide. But I think that's very different than people not being able to use a language. I mean, we're talking about exterminating people, so to put that in the same category as losing a language, I think is what might be called a package deal.
But they put it in the same category. I'm saying the people that invented the term, they put it in the same category.
And have they always done that, or is that a recent thing?
I believe they've always done that. But I mean,
so back in World War II,
I guess
they called
back in World
losing a
War II
language
the term genocide. The term genocide exists post-Holocaust.
Okay.
And so basically, I mean, what happened is like the Holocaust happened, and people were like, "Holy shit! Like, what was that?" And they got together and sort of defined this specific category of crime, which again sort of like exists on a collective basis. It's a crime committed against a collective of people, composed of like, I guess you could say like many crimes that are committed against individuals. But yeah, that's the term as defined by like the people who conceived of it.
Well, when did they? So, can you find me a source that says that?
I'm eating fried rice in my front.
All right. Well, right now I'm not buying the claim that in its origin, it was understood
Okay.
to mean
I
a
mean, I think
linguistic
I'll go into
destruction.
the other room and I'll Google this quickly for you.
All right. I'll also look. I'll look it up. I see some
Yeah.
more people in the chat here. Maybe I'll take a moment to read a few chats. Caracalla. All right. Maybe I need to block that person.
Well, why did you block him? What did he say?
Vulgarity.
Oh, okay.
That's at least part of the reason.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is the 1948 Genocide Convention. So I guess this would be the oldest definition. And it defines genocide as any five of acts committed with first intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. The acts in question include killing members of the group, causing them serious bodily or mental harm, imposing living conditions intended to destroy the group, preventing birth, or forcibly transferring children out of the group. That's the last one I think is the most important for like the specific case I'm making, I guess, right? Because that's you can transfer children out of the group and like you're not like literally, exterminating the people in the group the same way that was intended in the Holocaust, but you are sort of destroying the group or intending to destroy the group because like the people will not exist without children, without like people specifically passing down their language and their culture. That's the only way people exist.
Well, that didn't say anything about language.
Sure, but did you hear the transferring children part? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
well, why do you think that counts as genocide in their minds?
I'm just concerned with the language point right now.
Yeah, so I'm also concerned with the language point. I'm trying to like have you draw the conclusion, I guess. Right, like why would transferring children out of the group even matter? If like let's say I guess because we literally had this happen. Like in the United States, we transferred children out of these groups. Why did that matter? Like why would someone look at this again? It's any one of these five things counts as genocide according to the original definition. Why would someone look at what we did with transferring children out of these groups and call it genocide?
Maybe we can talk about that, but I'm not ready to talk about that.
Sorry.
Because
Okay, sorry. That was rude. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Yeah.
I
didn't mean
didn't.
to be a dick. I'm not trying to be a dick. Yeah.
Well, I didn't even hear what you said that you think was.
Okay. I started laughing, which it was rude. So I'm sorry I did that.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah.
do like to keep it civil here. So,
yeah, of course you do, and I do too. So like I regret doing that. But
okay,
yeah.
so right now, my mind
Yeah.
is still on the point about language. My point.
I'm trying to make the point about language for you,
but I don't see how it
like
connects. I don't see how it
You don't
connects.
see how it can. Okay, well that's you're saying you're not ready to answer the question I just asked, but that's like the whole point.
You
what I'm
said
trying
right
to say.
before that if you get that you mentioned linguicide or something,
Mhm.
and I think maybe you regarded that as a type of genocide. Is
Yeah.
that correct?
And yeah, but do you understand? Like, this is why the question of children is so crucial. Again, so transferring children out of the group, as according to the original definition of genocide, the people who made the term, that is like one of the things that qualifies something as a genocide. My question is, why do you think that matters? Like transferring children out of the group, like why would that count as a genocide? Why would someone look at what we did in the United States to American Indians and transferring children out of their groups as a genocide? Why would that even count? And the answer I'm trying to get you to is language, like or language at least as a component of it, right?
Well, maybe there's a connection to language, but I'm not sure it's direct enough to draw a connection to genocide. And maybe I also need to be more clear on what you mean by transferring children out of a group. Also, what is this? Can I look? You said that you were reading from the 1948 Genocide Convention.
You could look up it was I was reading from, there's like a whole Wikipedia article called like definition of genocide, and I went to the oldest one, like the original one from 1948. That was defined post Holocaust.
All right, I'm looking up definition of genocide, Wikipedia, 1948,
Yeah.
and that's the, let's see, the Genocide Convention is the first hit that came up. Is that the article you're looking at?
No, I think it was literally called. Oh, sorry, genocide definitions. It's called genocide definitions.
Okay, let me try searching for that on Wikipedia. Genocide definition.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. Plural genocide definitions.
Yeah. Here, actually, I think now's the perfect time for me to like lead you with that and contemplate that, just because I've a bad habit of staying and just talking in these conversations for like forever and ever. So like now that I'm like sort of realizing the opportunity to like get out, I'm gonna lead with that. The thing that I read is like basically it's like the first section of the article. I guess like that. So I'll just leave you with the point of I guess contemplating the term genocide, and I think why I think all this stuff falls into it. But I'm gonna eat dinner. Hope you have a good evening. Bye bye.
All right. Okay, well, I found the article on Wikipedia, so maybe I'll look at it later. But I want to give some priority to people who are here live, and so I'm not going to necessarily look at it right now, but maybe I'll look at it later. Let me do a search on the word language. I'll read, here's one sentence. Raphael Lemkin's original definition of genocide was broader than that later adopted by the UN. He focused on genocide as the, quote, maybe I should, let me share this on the screen. So this is the genocide definitions article on Wikipedia. I was just reading this sentence. Now, I don't know who Raphael Lemkin is, a Polish Jewish lawyer who is known for coining the term genocide and for campaigning to establish the Genocide Convention, which legally defines the act. It was amidst this environment of World War II that Lincoln coined the term genocide to describe Nazi Germany's extermination policy. Okay, so here it says, his definition of genocide was broader than that later adopted by the UN. He focused on genocide as the, quote, destruction of essential foundations of the life of national groups, including actions that led to the disintegration of the political and social institutions of culture, language, national feelings, religion, and the economic existence of national groups. Scholarly definitions vary, but there are three common themes: the violence or other action taken should be deliberate, organized, sustained, and large scale. Atrocities are selective for a distinguishable group. And the perpetrator takes steps to prevent the group from surviving or reproducing in a given territory. The colloquial understanding of genocide is heavily influenced by the Holocaust as its archetype and is conceived as innocent victims targeted for their ethnic identity rather than for any political reason. So it does mention language here. Actions that led to the disintegration of the political and social institutions of culture, language, national feelings, religion, and the economic existence of national groups. Well, if that is a genocide, if getting rid of the language qualifies as a genocide, I think it might be a package deal to put that in the same category as exterminating people, like killing everyone who is of a certain ethnic group. Ayn Rand did use the term package deals to refer to putting together things that are essentially different. And that would make for an invalid type of concept, putting together things that are essentially different. And I think maybe you could regard this as a package deal concept. And if Israel is doing part of the package deal, like getting rid of language, I don't even know if they are doing that. But even if they are doing that, I think putting the annihilation of language in the same category as annihilating people, I think might qualify as a package deal and therefore invalid concept, because they're so different. Israel has Arabs in its Knesset, the government, and they do roof knocking. I mean, are these the actions of a genocidal country? They're at least, it doesn't seem, I don't think they're at least not trying to exterminate the people. So is the only claim that when Israel is charged with genocide, is the claim just that they're trying to get rid of language? I don't even know if that's true. But is that all people mean when they charge Israel with genocide? They're not trying to exterminate people. They're just trying to exterminate a language. But it seems like a lot of people want to charge them with genocide in the sense of exterminating the people, and that's why they're killing all these innocents. But I think that's a smear. I don't think they are targeting innocents. And I mentioned a previous conversation I had where someone claimed that, and then I asked him for evidence, and then the article he sent me had nothing about that. I think he was just bullshitting. So I don't know if this person, this Dan who called in, could have given me any evidence. Now, he made some claims. He made some claims in the course of that conversation about young children with no one around them, I think, being attacked. But, is that just bullshit? Can you send me a source to back that up? I would definitely need to see a source. I'm not going to take claims like that at face value. especially given the bullshit I have seen that people have tried to use as alleged evidence. Oh, hi, Nick. Richard Bicker asks, "Are you monitoring your YouTube live chat?" I am, but not consistently. So I'll try to look at it some more now. When I have a lot to say about something, sometimes I don't look at the chat for a while, but let me look at the chat some now. Thanks for your votes on the poll, by the way. All right, so we've got Jake King here. Kudababa, hello. He says, Dan runs a clean podcast. Yeah, I do. Luke and Rate. Where's the last chat I read? Oh, we were talking about Schubert before. So the next chat was from Richard. Which I just shared on the screen. When you have a minute, could you compare and contrast your basic positions in those of ARI's Yaron Brook? I'd also like to hear your evaluation of end and resumption of the Iran war. Okay. Are you still here, Richard? I'm more likely to engage if I know people are still here, but I guess you've been waiting for a while. I'll say at least something about that, and maybe I'll say more if you want to follow up. Okay, so compare and contrast my basic positions and those of ARI's Ayn Rand Institute's Yaron Brook. I basically agree with Yaron. I mean, we both support Ayn Rand's philosophy, so nothing immediately comes to mind as a difference between us, at least on the essential points of the philosophy. But do you maybe specifically mean about the Iran war? That I'm less in a position to comment on than the philosophy in general. He's much more knowledgeable about the Iran war. He follows it much more closely than I do. I do recall him hearing on a show within the last week or two that he was wrong about the war, and that initially I think he was more positive about the prospects for it, and then later he decided that he shouldn't have been as optimistic, and maybe he was more supportive of it than he should have been, given his later view of things, given that it was Trump conducting the war. And I think I guess a week or two ago, he might have said we're actually worse off than if the war hadn't had happened at all. Whereas I think his initial view, when the war first broke out in February 28th or early March, I think his initial view was that it wasn't a bad idea. And it was, even if it wasn't conducted in the way he would conduct it, it was still a net positive. Better that we had done something rather than nothing. But I think his later view, as of a week or two ago, was that it was actually a net negative, and so his initial view was incorrect. That's my understanding. Oh, Richard says, I'm here and will comment as you speak. Are you aligned with Yaron's take that the right is a vastly more dangerous threat than the left? What about your views? Well, look, you were asking for a comparison of mine and his, so I was first trying to get clear and get out on the table what his views are, and then having done that, see if I can compare my view to his. But I guess I don't... I mean, I'm pleased that Iran has been degraded. I think they've been set back at least. So I don't know how close they were to getting a nuclear weapon. Now, allegedly, it was claimed last year in the 12-day war from June of 2025 that their ability to get a nuclear weapon was made impossible or much harder. But there wasn't any longer a nuclear threat. But then if that's true, why did we need to continue this war in 2026? So it seems like the initial claim might have just been a lie. The 12-day war didn't actually end the nuclear threat. So they attacked again in 2026. And I guess their ability, maybe they're, instead of being a threat now or within the next 5 years, maybe they're no longer going to be a serious threat for the next 10 or 15 years. I don't know. But I hope at least we've, maybe it's good if we've kicked the can down the road. So instead of the potential of a nuclear attack from Iran emanating within the next 5 years, maybe it's there's not really a potential now for that. Maybe it's going to take 10 or 15 or more years. So maybe it's at least bought us some time. And I guess that's good. Or at least if it's not good, I would want to hear why. If it ultimately enabled them to be more powerful, maybe it should be seen as a net loss, even though it does delay their ability to attack. So I guess I don't have a strong view. I mean, I think that the Iranian regime should be destroyed, but whether it's appropriate for the U.S. now, given its leadership, to do that. Maybe they would just make things worse if they cut some really bad deal. I don't even think Iran's government should be dealt with. I don't think we should be making a deal with a murderous regime. Why would they honor any deal? There was recently some deal, which I guess is supposed to be announced tomorrow. That's what I heard. Or a memorandum of understanding, I guess is the term, which I don't know if that should be considered a deal, but anyways, I don't think we should be negotiating with a murderous regime. I think we should just destroy them. And you can't count on a murderous regime to honor a deal. I mean, if they're willing to kill people, including their own citizens, thousands or tens of thousands of them, why are they going to be honest? Are these trustworthy people? Does it make any sense to think they're going to be honest about sticking to some deal? I don't think it makes any sense at all. So our government is certainly not doing the best thing. Whether it's better than nothing, I'm not sure. Okay, well, let me read some more of these chats here. Did you not support Trump before he came to power? I didn't support, I mean, I've never supported Trump. If you're asking me, I don't know if that question is directed to me. From Luke, I've never voted for Trump. I did think he might have been the lesser of evils in his first presidential run against Hillary Clinton. I'm not sure about that, but I was at least open to that. He might have been the lesser of evil. But after his first term, I have not seen him as a lesser of evils. Like when he ran against Kamala Harris, I didn't vote for either one of them, actually. But if I had to choose one of them, I think I would have chosen Harris. I think January 6th was really bad, and Trump's lying about the 2020 election. I see a lot more chats here from Richard. Jake says, okay, sure, but I just got here and I just basically described your position. I live in Bubble Village. What do you think about the geopolitics between Bubble Village and Eviltopia? All right, I don't know what that's talking about. Maybe that question was directed at Jake. The question about did you not support Trump before he came to power? I don't know if Jake or Luke is still here. You can let me know if you are. Richard says, obviously you are unfamiliar with live chat. The point of focus is always the last comments. If you read things in order, you'll be many minutes or hours behind your current viewers. I'm aware of that. Sometimes I read the last chats first, but not always. Sometimes I think it's better to go in order because there's a logical progression within the chat, and people are saying things that I can only understand if I've read the previous comments, whereas if I read them in reverse order, it's harder to understand. Like imagine reading a novel backwards. It's harder to follow. It's not exactly like that, but there's advantages and disadvantages to starting with the latest chats, but I've done both. Let's look at the poll results. 19 votes now, and about 3/4 of them say no, they don't use TikTok. And okay, a quarter says yes. So I've been doing chats on live streams on TikTok recently. That's why I asked. If you were here at the beginning of the show, you would have heard me talk about this some, but I've been doing some more live streams on TikTok, and I wanted to get a sense of how many people in my YouTube audience are also on TikTok. So maybe you all can follow me over there. And so if I'm doing fewer streams on YouTube, but more streams on TikTok, then maybe you can still follow my content. So if you're not getting and maybe this will incentivize you to join. TikTok if you're not already over there already. Right now I have 222 followers on TikTok. And I guess I've been able to get much larger audiences over there. Like right now on YouTube, how many people are watching? It says 9. Yesterday when I was on TikTok, I had 90. 90. 10x. So even though I've been on YouTube a lot longer, I've been live streaming for over a year. I've only been live streaming on TikTok for a few weeks. So for some reason, I get much larger audiences over there. And that incentivizes me to spend more time over there. But I get more money on YouTube, although I haven't gotten any money today. No one's done a super chat yet. Does anyone want to do a super chat? Richard says you've got 1,140 YouTube subs. Actually, I have 1,144, but it doesn't show you the ones digit on my public page. But I can show you. I can share my screen. Oh, now it's 111:45. Somebody subscribed. Thank you. See, this is my YouTube studio. You can see the exact number of subscribers. And I really appreciate all those subscribers. Thank you. But in addition to number of subscribers, I'm also looking to make money at this. And so far I've made money on YouTube, but not on TikTok. And I consider both things, like how many people am I reaching and how much money am I making. And I guess those things correlate with each other to some extent, at least. But I have a lot more followers on YouTube. But as I said, I'm getting much more viewers on TikTok. Like, even though I have over 5 times as many subscribers on YouTube as I have followers on TikTok. I said I only have 222 followers on TikTok. I get 10 times more viewers during my live streams, sometimes at least. Oh, Michael says, I will throw you a sub. Oh, so maybe you were number 1145. Thank you, Michael. Richard says you need 50K subs to make decent money on YouTube. Well, I don't have ads turned on. I am eligible to do that. And I did that for one live stream. I turned on ads. And I could turn on ads right now. Now that might turn some people away. And I have told people that if you want me to turn ads off, you could send me some money. And someone did that, actually. I had ads turned on. And you see the ads during the live stream, not just if you're watching the replay. Unless you're a YouTube Premium member. Oh, David Wilson just came in with a super chat. Thank you, David. I appreciate that. I'm going to type thank you in the chat. Okay, great. That was the first super chat of the day. And you see the number went up to 1 out of 5. So we still have an hour and a half left to hit the goal. The goal is to get 5 super chats within 3 hours. They could be of any amount. You can also do a super sticker if you want, but that's not going to make this number go up. I'll still count it though. But you click on this $sign, you can either do a super chat or a super sticker. You can leave, if you don't have anything to say, you can do a super chat and just leave it blank. All right, I'm going to read David's chat here since he just did a super chat. I want to give him some priority. He says, would love to hear what your favorite movies are and why. Not sure if that question has ever been raised before. I'm not sure either. I think it might have. We have talked about movies here on my show, but I don't know if I was ever asked exactly that. So favorite movies. I really like Humphrey Bogart's movies back in the 40s or 50s, like Casablanca, The Big Sleep, The Maltese Falcon. I went through a phase where I was watching a lot of movies from that era, and Humphrey Bogart was my favorite actor. Why did I like those? That's harder to answer. Maybe it was something about just the confidence, self-esteem. Humphrey Bogart projected very calm, cool, connected to reality, facing facts. So at least that's what's coming to mind now, is that the vibe I get from the characters he played. But there are also later movies I enjoyed. Terminator 2, I liked. Arnold Schwarzenegger movie from, I think, around 1990 or 91. That was before I learned about objectivism. Several years. I first discovered objectivism in 1997. And so that movie came out several years before that. Free will, I think, is one of the themes of that movie. And at a certain point, Sarah O'Connor, she carves no fate into the picnic table. You remember that scene? But I don't know that that's had any relevance for me when I first saw it. I would have been about 12 years old, I guess. So maybe I was responding more to the characters as they seem cool. Arnold on his motorcycle, and I used to have a cardboard cutout of Arnold in his Terminator gear on my wall as a kid. Cool guy. And of course, he's got his amazing bodybuilder physique. So there's a little bit about the movies I like. I also like True Lies, another Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. I don't watch any movies now, though. I very rarely watch movies now. It's been, and maybe you can tell that the movies I'm mentioning are decades old. I used to have a Netflix subscription, but only for a year or two. I just didn't use it much, so I canceled it. Well, I did re-sign up once, but then I again canceled it because I didn't end up using it much. So I don't watch a lot of movies these days. But I think the movies I like tend to be older. I think they have better plots. This is not a point original to me, but I heard someone say, it might have been some objectivists say, that once color was introduced, the plots became less interesting, and the movies became more about special effects. Like back in the 40s and 50s, they were still black and white movies, and then I guess starting in the 60s, the movies became color, and special effects increasingly became the value that people or the emphasis, and it became less about writing a good story and more about the special effects. But I don't think that's the most important part. I think that's the story or the plot is the most important part. Ayn Rand said, "What's the most important thing in your writing?" And she said, "Plot." The three most important things, she said, they're plot, plot, and plot. That might have been in her fiction writing course. So maybe Hollywood has gotten away from that and emphasizes other things. All right, so let me read some more of these chats. David says, just showed my girlfriend Casablanca, and she also loved it. Perfect movie. My number one is German language film, The Lives of Others. I haven't seen that one. And then you say number two, The Promised Land with Mads Mikkelsen. Okay. Haven't seen that one either. Thanks for mentioning those. Maybe if I get back into another movie phase, I'll check those out. I think that We the Living was a good movie, and Ayn Rand considered that the best movie of, well, I guess there were only two during her life. There was a movie of The Fountainhead, which she was involved in the making of, and there was a movie of We the Living, which she was not involved in the making of, but it was made in Italy, and eventually it was suppressed in Italy, but it was somehow preserved. It was suppressed under Mussolini, I think, whose government, I guess, eventually realized that it was not just an anti-communist film, it was also an anti-fascist film, but they didn't realize that at first. And it was somehow preserved despite the oppression, and eventually became widely available now. And it's been remastered, I think. Duncan Scott, I think, is the producer who had a role in, I guess, the main guy behind the latest version of the movie, where it's been cleaned up digitally. I think that was a good movie. And I also enjoyed the Fountainhead movie. I mean, it's not like the book. It's not as good as the book, I don't think, but still good. I did not like the Atlas Shrugged movies. Well, I only saw one of them. So it came out in 3 parts, and I only saw part 1, and I thought it was meh. Kind of mediocre. Maybe I'd give it a C. And it wasn't good enough for me to want to see the others. I heard the parts 2 or 3 were even worse. So I don't plan to see those. Nick says you can buy a digital version of We the Living for about $20, or rent it for like $5. All right. Maybe I should do that. I did buy The King of Kings, that's the movie where Ayn Rand met her husband on the set. So when she first moved to the United States, well, first she was in Chicago for about 6 months after leaving Europe. Originally born in St. Petersburg, and then when she was 21, around that time, I think she had her 21st birthday on her way to the U.S. I think when she was in Berlin, I think she might have had her 21st birthday there, 1926. She was born in 1905. And so she arrives in New York, I guess. I don't know if it was Ellis Islands, maybe, in 1926. I guess it was either February or... because her birthday is February 2nd. So if she had her birthday in Berlin on February 2nd of 1926. Now, I don't know if that's... I guess that's New Style, because there's Old Style and New Style dates. So there's... Russia was still on the Julian calendar at the time of the Russian Revolution. But... so I think maybe by the Old Style Julian calendar, maybe her birthday was in January. But anyways, by the time she left Russia, I think they might have switched to the New Style Gregorian calendar. So I guess she arrived in the U.S. either sometime in February or March of 1926. And then I guess she took a train to Chicago, because she lived with her relatives for about 6 months. But ultimately, her destination was Hollywood. She was coming to the U.S. to study the movie industry. And she eventually makes it out to Hollywood. And very early on, I don't know if her first day in Hollywood or second day or sometime very early on, she met Cecil B. DeMille, who was one of the biggest names in the film industry at the time. I think she saw him on the lot, or maybe he was pulling out his car from the Culver Studios film lot, and she saw him, and she was just staring at him, and she was offered a job by him. I forget exactly what the interaction went like. I don't know if he asked her if she might have said she wants to learn English, and maybe she said something like, oh, or maybe he said, oh, well, if you want to learn English, you gotta, or learn to write movie scripts. Maybe she said she was interested in, I forget. I don't want to butcher the story, but anyways, she was offered a job as an extra to work for Cecil B. DeMille, and she met her husband, who was in a minor role. He was one of the Roman soldiers in the movie The King of Kings. That's how she met her husband. Oh, and I eventually bought this movie, The King of Kings, on DVD from Amazon, and I found Ayn Rand, moving images of Ayn Rand, not just still images. I might have been the first person to find this, actually, because there were still images of Ayn Rand in the documentary Ayn Rand: The Sense of Life, which came out in 1997 or 1998. Documentary of Ayn Rand's life, produced by Michael Paxton and Jeff Briding. He was also involved with that. And in the movie, there are still images of Ayn Rand as an extra. In like crowd scenes, there are images of Ayn Rand. But I found actual moving video when I got this DVD and I slowed it down, there were I think more than one place where you can actually find Ayn Rand. Now, some of the places I found, it might have been bonus footage. It was actually a 2 DVD set, and I think one DVD is just the final product of the movie, but the other DVD, it might have like outtakes or bonus footage, which wasn't used in the final version. And I think some of the places I found her might have been on that bonus CD. But I was really excited to see that. Perhaps the oldest video in existence of Ayn Rand. And I posted about this on Harry Binswanger's forum, the HB letter, HBL. Harry Binswanger is an objectivist philosopher who knew Ayn Rand, and he was a friend of Ayn Rand in her later years. And he has a web forum for discussion of Ayn Rand's ideas. And I posted about this footage that I found on his HBL site back in, I guess this was 2014. I think that was the year when I found it. So if you get the DVD, you can see that. All right, let me go back to the chat. How do people call in? I see Richard retracted a bunch of his messages. Did he retract all of his messages? I wonder why he did that. I didn't read them all. I read some of them. Some of them might have been displayed on the screen. Or maybe all of them were at some point. I don't know. But anyways, that's interesting. Richard retracted all of his messages. How do people call in? There's a number on my background. I don't know if you're still here. Ari Eisen. You just call that number on my background. 657-233-0878. Or you can click on the Zoom link in the description under the video. Michael says, I somehow agree with like 90% of the things in your good box. Okay. How can free will exist if everything is determined? Well, I don't think everything is determined. Uncaused, undetermined choice isn't possible. Well, caused has different senses. I think a choice is, in a sense, it's caused. It's caused by the nature of human beings. Given our nature, we have to make choices. We can't avoid it. So if you have a different nature, like if you have the nature of a bird or a rock or a leaf, then you can't make choices. Those things can't make choices. But causation or causality, the way Objectivism understands it, is that an entity acts in accordance with its nature. The law of causality is the law of identity applied to action. Leonard Peikoff put it that way. That's Ayn Rand's top student. So things act in accordance with their identity. That's what the law of causality says. Things act in accordance with their identity. They can't act in contradiction to their identity, which is what happens when there's a miracle. Like if a woman turns into a pillar of salt, to use an example from the Bible, that's a miracle because she's acting in contradiction to her nature. It's not of the nature of a woman and the material she's composed of that she could just turn into salt. That would take a miracle, a violation of the law of causality or the law of identity. But there is no violation of the law of identity to say that there are choices. In fact, given the identity of human beings, they must make choices. It would be a violation of identity if they did not make choices. So causality doesn't mean determinism or necessitation. It's not the same thing. At least on Objectivism's view. It just means things have to act in accordance with their nature, but that doesn't rule out that it could be something's nature, that it has to make choices. Have you ever heard of effective altruism? Yes. I haven't looked into it much. So, I don't know how much I can say about it. Oh, hi, John. John just popped in the chat. I do oppose altruism, that is, living for the sake of others. And I don't think one's goal should be to be effective at living for the sake of others. I think one should try to be effective at the goal of living for oneself and pursuing one's own happiness. Don Watkins wrote a book called Effective Egoism. Don Watkins is a writer at the Ayn Rand Institute. A few years ago, sometime within the last few years, he published a book called Effective Egoism. I've read part of it, maybe about half of it. Why tax is listed as bad? Because they are coercive and anti-freedom. I should have the right to keep my money and spend it on what I choose. I'm the one who earned it. You don't have a right to my money. It's not my responsibility to pay for your health care or your children's education or your retirement through Social Security. That's your responsibility. So it's an injustice to tax me to support you. People should be responsible for themselves. Now, if you want my voluntary help, you can ask me for help. And if I know you and you're a friend of mine, I might voluntarily help you, but it's immoral for you to force me at gunpoint to pay for your life. And the government is an agent of force. Even if you're not the one wielding the gun, the government does so on people's behalf, and people with guns will show up at your door eventually if you refuse to pay taxes, and they will haul you off to jail. So there is a threat of force behind taxation, and that's a violation of freedom, and it's a violation of people's moral rights to live for their own sake. It implies I have a duty to support others and not live as I think is best. But I think I do have a moral right to live as I think is best. Should one be effective in debates? That would be good. I'm not sure why you are asking that. I try to be effective in debate. But more important than winning a debate is reaching the truth. So I'm happy to lose a debate if I learn something. The main goal, I think, should be to reach the truth, and maybe debates can help people do that. But the goal should not be to just look like you won a debate in the eyes of other people. I think the most important goal there should be to figure out what's true. Some of them are pretty extreme. You mean the effective altruists? Sam Bankman-Fried was one of them. He was let's see. I heard about him a while ago, 2 or 3 years, maybe. Yaron Brook did some shows about him. And he ran a company that he was borrowing money to cover his ability to pay out. I forget exactly how it went, but eventually his company collapsed or something, and he got hit with a lawsuit and for fraud. And did he go to jail? I think I heard something like that, but I didn't follow it very closely. All right, well, we got more people here. We're up into the double digits. That's nice to see. And I'm caught up in the chat now. I would have had a lot more chats to engage with, but from Richard, but he deleted all his chat messages. I don't know why. Let me go to his channel. I don't see anything on his channel. Does anyone know why he deleted his messages? Anyways, if you want to raise a new topic, now's a good time, because you would be the only topic left to engage with. Oh, here's one. I almost want to call in just to discuss this with an objectivist because it's complex and weird. Oh, you mean the Sam Bankman-Fried case? Okay, if that's what you mean, we could talk about it. I don't know much about it, so you could just present something to me, and I could react in the moment to what you say. But I don't have much prepared to say about that. I don't know if you're aware of Yaron Brook. He's another objectivist YouTuber, but he's done an entire show, maybe multiple shows on Sam Bankman-Fried. So you might be interested in checking his channel out. If someone wanted to read about the history of Western philosophy, do you have a recommendation for a detailed overview? Yeah, there are a few sources I can mention. W.T. Jones wrote a 5-volume history of philosophy, or history of Western philosophy, which I've read and I think is very good. Leonard Peikoff is the one who I heard about that series from. Oh, somebody's calling now. Let me see if I can pick that up. Oh, I have to allow Mike's access. I have to refresh the page. Okay. Yeah, sometimes I got to do that. So can you try calling back? Sometimes I got to refresh the Google Voice page. For me to pick up the call. So I just did that though. So if you call back, I should be able to pick it up. So W.T. Jones, that's one source. Wilhelm Windelband, he also wrote a history of philosophy, which Leonard Peikoff recommended. I've read part of that, not the whole thing. I think it's very dense. It was originally in German, but there's a translation of it into English. And he covers, I think, up through sometime in the 19th century. I think he himself was a Hegelian, but Leonard Peikoff highly recommends it. And there's still a lot you can learn from it, even if his perspective... Now, I don't know if his Hegelianism affects the way he writes his history of philosophy. But in any case, I think there's a lot of value you could get from that. All right, I hear it ringing again. I turned off the volume, though, this time, so I can screen it. Michael, okay. Hello? Hi, Michael. You're the Michael from the chat, right? Okay. Yeah, let me just turn your volume on so people can hear you.
Sure.
All right, so this is Michael, who was commenting about effective altruism in the chat. And let me just take a quick look at the chat before or the remaining chats I didn't get to yet. I see a chat from John,
go ahead.
John Wayne and OK, another person by the name of OK. Yeah, so maybe I'll engage with those after this call. Aaron Shaw put in another chat. And maybe I'll have more to say about David's on the history of philosophy. But let me just do this call first, and then I can engage with some more of these chats. All right, so this is Michael Hamilton, who was in the chat mentioning effective altruism. And you want to talk more about that?
And this is just a very interesting concept to have like a philosophy kind of talk show where you can call in. So thank you for letting me do this.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to do it. I like to promote Ayn Rand's ideas, and this is one way to do that.
Yeah.
People call in.
Yeah. So the effective altruism movement, it's kind of interesting because they're like ultra rationalist utilitarians, but then like a lot of ideas that you would associate with far leftism are the ideas that they're trying to maximize for. So they're an interesting bunch of people, I would say. Nate Silver, who used to run that like 538 website, he writes about them in this most recent book, like On the Edge.
Okay, I haven't read that. I've heard of Nate Silver, but I didn't know he was affiliated with this effective altruism movements.
I think he might have just been interested in it, but yeah, I guess it's kind of interesting, especially since you're an objectivist. Just because you would think taking like a framework of utilitarianism, like trying to be rationalist, it would be more like conservative leaning, but there's the things that they're trying to promote and like the altruistic part to maximize utility for everybody, I think leads them into a very interesting slant on the political spectrum. And then they're very much engaged in like AI governance. Dario Amodei of Anthropic, I think he's also a part of the movement.
Okay, I just remembered something that is related to the effective altruist movement. You can correct me if this is wrong, but the way they understand it is it's good to be concerned not only with other people other than yourself right now who are existing, but even people who exist long into the future. And I don't know if this is called long-termism, but I have seen that word a couple times recently. So, and this might also be what some utilitarians hold, at least. It's not just the greatest number, or when they talk about the greatest good of the greatest number, they include not only human beings other than yourself, but also other conscious beings like animals or maybe even insects, some of them, and also all the species into the future, like thousands or millions of years into the future. I don't know if you've heard about that, but I guess that's at least one form of altruism that one could hold.
No, I think you're, I think they definitely incorporate, aspects of that. They tend to be vegan, but it's just, prima facie. I think it's diametrically opposed with a lot of the ideas with Ayn Rand and objectivism, especially in the way that you maximize your utility. It's obviously not self-interested, right? But they, like the thing with Sam Bankman-Fried, it's just I don't think the fall of FTX, the exchange that he was running, had anything to do with overbelief in the philosophy, but I guess there's like a kind of arrogance to think that, we should maximize money to maximize utility to make the world a better place for the long term. I feel like they're trying to justify their morals in the pursuit of like individualism, in the pursuit of maximizing profit, which I find kind of fascinating.
Okay. Well, individualism, that sounds opposed to altruism or utilitarianism. I mean, it's not exactly the same concept as egoism, but at least it's maybe a neighboring concept. But are you saying they are a kind of individualist movements, the effective altruist movements, or I wouldn't think of them that way, but is that how you're thinking of them?
Well, no, just in some ways. So like, they're expected value maximizers, and they'll like overly utilize like, game theory to, justify their choices and use that to inform. So like, I feel like it's also a fairly, rigid framework, but, expected value, I think, is misunderstood. It's probabilities on average, right? So maybe it doesn't hold its value. That being your choice, I mean, like your choice maybe not have that expected value actually realize. And then just I feel like game theory is, because it relates to the Chicago school. used to like more rationalize or like or explain rather than rationalize, to explain individualistic behavior most of the time. So that also just an interesting observation from my end.
I haven't looked into game theory much, but I guess it was. I guess I have heard it described sometimes as people doing what's most in their self-interest, and sometimes it's to cooperate with the other person. Like the prisoner's dilemma, I guess, is a prominent example used in game theory. What should you do if you're in prison with somebody else and you could take a chance on escaping? Like if you rat out the other guy, and you could either cooperate with the person and both agree not to rat each other out, or so. I forget exactly how the example goes, but anyway, I guess somehow self-interest, or their people are presumed to be egoistic or self-interested, and then depending on the how they choose to interact with others, like different courses of action might or might not be egoistic. I don't know. I know some objectivists, they kind of downplay those cases or say that's not really reflective of. There's some kind of criticism that's made of the whole framing that's used in Prisoner's Dilemma. I don't know if that's like it's not a good window into what egoistic action looks like, or I'm not sure exactly what the criticism is, but I know some objectivists don't like it. But anyways, I don't want to ramble too much. Let me just pause there and see if you want to say anything about any of that.
Sure. So like maybe just like to level set game theory. It started actually out as a mathematical model, just to play poker. John von Neumann, the famous mathematician out of Princeton, he liked to gamble, and him with another co-author, Oscar Morgenstern, they kind of just like wanted to mathematically reason the best decision that you could make, and they came up with something called it's a utility function, and while the definitions of that mathematical function kind of describe what you might think is, maybe an egoistic or self-interested actor, they were really trying to, in theory, get a baseline mathematical definition of what would be rational in a game, and then it's just expanded out through like a lot of the social sciences, human biology. John Nash. I don't know if people have seen the movie A Beautiful Mind, but he like wrote on game theory, and that's part of like the prisoner's dilemma thing. There's certain scenarios based on like the rules and the context of the game that you will have if you pick this strategy, you can't do any worse, and there's no reason for you to ever switch this strategy. And there's obviously flaws with every theory, right? But that's kind of like the gist of it, is like they believe that there is a best decision that you can reason mathematically for in theory.
Okay, so there's a tendency among some philosophers to mathematize philosophy, and I think you see this with people like Bertrand Russell, maybe Frege. There's the whole movement of symbolic logic, which starts with Frege and Russell in the late 19th century. I think they made attempts to mathematize philosophy or logic, and I think it's I guess I'm not convinced it's a fruitful approach, and maybe it's a kind of pseudo rigor. Like there might be a kind of envy of these hard sciences like physics or chemistry, where they are very mathematical. And I think some philosophers think, oh, well, if we can make philosophy more like that, then that would lend more rigor and objectivity to our discipline. And so they try to introduce mathematical formalism and into philosophy. And I don't know if something like that is going on in the case of game theory. Like philosophy maybe has a reputation of being kind of subjective and woozy, and as compared to the hard sciences. And so if we can make it more like the hard sciences, which have been very successful, I think people recognize that there's been a lot of progress there. And we've gone to the moon thanks to all the scientific knowledge that has been discovered and the technology that's been invented. And so I think there's a widespread view that humanities, like philosophy, including philosophy, have not made much progress in contrast to the sciences. And maybe in order to make more progress in the humanities, we need to mathematize it like has been done with the sciences. And so I wonder if that kind of motivation is behind the development of game theory. So
actually, I think like historically, game theory informed the further mathematization, or whatever you would call it, into economics. And I think it was a big influencer at the Chicago school, because now they could define rationality as being more self-interested and to explain firm behavior. So, it's definitely like intertwined with that. As far as philosophy goes, I'm not sure about philosophy. I've got a master's in like international security, but like, social science, I think, like took that idea from the Chicago school and also tried to apply it, especially in political science, in that way, for the same reasons you said, to, legitimize their findings, like the hard sciences. But, there are like flaws, and especially statistical like problems with the way that, they approach some of these issues, right? Like I think a lot of the philosophical part in trying to do social science is the operationalization of variables, because you're taking things that are abstract a lot of the time and trying to like describe them in a way where you can measure them, and then like use those measurable findings to dictate policy, and that's why I think like maybe nowadays, maybe I'm stereotyping, but like that's why there's this like association with like more left-leaning ideals in political science, and like they're trying to use scientific models to like justify an objective truth when there's flaws within the way that they're doing science, if that makes sense.
I followed some of that. You mentioned economics. I think that actually is a field where it is legitimate to introduce a lot of math into it. So that's so I guess if game theory came up in an economic context, maybe that's fine and appropriate. But it also just occurred to me that there actually is a tie between math and Ayn Rand's philosophy, and that in her theory of concepts, she has what you might call a mathematical approach. She sees the difference between units that fall under a concept as varying in their measurements. So in her book, Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology, she puts forward a theory of how we form concepts. And so, for instance, the concept of short as opposed to long is it denotes, like you might say a certain person is short. He's not tall. Mm-hmm. He's a short person. And this other person is also short. He's not exactly the same height as the first person you called short, but the measurements of their distinct heights falls within a certain range, within the short range. And likewise, someone who's tall, there might be maybe somebody is 7'3" and another person is 6'11", and we would call them both tall. Not that they are identical heights, but they have their heights fall within a certain range that we label with the term tall. And it's a kind of mathematical perspective on concept formation, which I think helps give concepts objectivity. So I do think there is some there is value in some contexts, at least, of mathematizing a field. And I think physics actually made a lot of progress once it became mathematized with Galileo, and before that, I guess there were concepts like I don't know, inertia or force, acceleration. But when you can start measuring these things, as Galileo did when he was rolling things down inclined planes, then you can start to develop principles of proportionality and formulate laws like F equals ma. And what's the 9.8 meters per second squared is the rate of acceleration on Earth. Is that you can definitely make a lot of progress when you mathematize a field. I just think it might be overdone in some cases, but also like economics. So there's, I think there are some philosophic problems in the way it's conventionally understood. Like there's a concept called perfect competition. I don't know if the Chicago school signs on to that, but at least some economists have this idea of perfect competition, where everyone has equal access to information or something. And I don't know that I could give it a good explanation of the problems with that. Other people in the objectivist movement have done more thinking about this than I have, like Harry Binswanger. I think he's given some talks on the philosophy of economics. And he's the one I mentioned before who I think has been critical of game theory. So although I'm sure he's in favor of some mathematizing going on in economics, maybe the way it's done in game theory, he has some issues with that, which I can't really articulate well. But let me just pause there.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, game theory has its critiques. I mean, if you test it, if you test some of the expectations, because they think it not only defines what rational is, but it attempts to make empirical claims without testing them. And Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, which is why Kahneman won the Nobel Prize in like the 2000s, when they tested some of the things that game theory said would happen as a predictive theory, they failed a lot of the times. Humans aren't perfectly rational, and I think there's an they try and treat assumptions as axioms, and it's that kind of confusion in trying to apply the lessons that you would learn from like a game theory paper that can cause problems in the world. It's funny. The introduction to objectivist philosophy is on my bookshelf, so I just thought that was funny too when you were mentioning that.
Oh, yeah. I just did a Google search on game theory, and the first line from the AI overview says, game theory is the mathematical study of strategic decision-making. And then it goes on. It analyzes situations where multiple players, in quotes, make choices that depend on each other, seeking to optimize their own outcomes based on what they anticipate others will do. Now, there's another aspect, like you said, these studies have found people aren't perfectly rational. Another point is I don't think people are egoistic. So I don't think people are always optimizing for what's in their self-interest. So if that's an assumption of game theory, I think it would be based on a flawed premise. I think altruism is a very common view, maybe actually a dominant view when it comes to morality. So if any economic theory is assuming that people are trying to do what is best for their own interests. I think it's operating on a faulty assumption. Now, maybe there's some headway you could make. If you do have that assumption, how would people act? Maybe there's some valuable things you could learn from that. But I don't think it actually describes how all people act. Here's one. Let me just read this one other thing. Famous examples of game theory. It says, the prisoner's dilemma, this classic model reveals why two rational individuals might not cooperate, even if it is in their best interest to do so, because they fear betrayal. Oh, I heard a beep. Somebody else tried to call in. Yeah, somebody's trying to call in. I'm going to just put it to do not disturb, so I don't hear the beep because it's a little distracting. But you can leave a voicemail, or you could tell me in the YouTube chat what you want to talk about, and then maybe I'll go to your call. Okay. But yeah, just to finish reading that example, prisoner's dilemma, classic model reveals why two rational individuals might not cooperate, even if it is in their best interest to do so. So I don't think people are always acting in their own best interests. I think many people are altruistic and subordinating their best interest to others. And then, because you mentioned Nash, let me just finish by reading that. I don't know if you can see this. I'm sharing on my screen. If you have YouTube open, you can see what I'm sharing. Nash equilibrium, named after mathematician John Nash. This is a stable state in a game where no player can improve their payoff by unilaterally changing their strategy. Okay. All right, I just wanted to read that because I recognize Nash, who you mentioned earlier. But yeah, I'll just stop there and come back to you.
Oh no, there's altruism. I think is interesting. You should look up the George R. Price. He was some kind of not savant, but maybe he could have been, but but he was into a bunch of different things. But one of his major contributions, which was out of field, but he was a smart guy, was an equation that he worked with W.D. Hamilton, who was a premier evolutionary biologist, called the Price equation, and not related to economics, but related to evolution. And this equation justifies why altruistic behavior might be evolutionarily stable in a game theory sense. And but this guy, it literally drove this person mad, and he stabbed himself with scissors and committed suicide over this idea that I think the interpretation was that even altruism is still self-interested, and he couldn't grapple the two. He gave away all of his stuff, and then before he killed himself too, and he was just a very troubled man from this this finding. It's on the Wikipedia page.
Yeah, I just pulled that up and shared it. George R. Price, an American population geneticist. Let's see.
Polymath. Bit of a polymath.
He converted to Christianity and gave all his possessions to the poor, struggling with a thyroid condition in conditions of great poverty. He grew increasingly depressed and committed suicide. So he's well, it sounded like were you saying he committed suicide as a result of his theory?
Yeah, that's what I've read before. It was the interesting and difficulty grappling with the evolutionary representation of that altruistic behavior.
Okay. I see somebody has dialed into the Zoom phone line. Hold on, let me just see if I recognize that person. Oh, Mo. Somebody by the name of Mo. I don't know if you're the same person who tried to call into the Google voice number, but if that's you, could you let me know in the YouTube chat who you are? If that's you who tried to call in to Zoom? Could you just tell me that in the YouTube chat? I don't want to take a call if it's just going to be a troll. Sometimes I do have trolls who try to call in, and I'd rather stick with this call rather than interrupt it for a troll who I'm going to drop in a minute anyway. So if you let me know in the YouTube chat who you are, and if I sense that this is a legitimate caller, I will more likely take your call. Let me see. Did anyone? No, I don't see a voicemail. So I'm just going to stick with Michael for now. Okay. So where are we? Did you just want to talk about game theory some more, or is there anything else?
No, just maybe no. Like your thoughts of such an interpretation. Like just I think it was interesting.
Well, you were the one who
you have a very clearly defined philosophy. That is.
Were you the one in the chat who said you agree with 90% of the things in the good box that I have on my background?
Yeah, just glancing over.
Okay. Well, if you want to talk about any of that, or the 10% that you might not agree with, you could raise that. Maybe that's something. Maybe that would be good material.
As much as I wouldn't say I try and balance things. So to me, objectivism maybe takes some ideas of self-interest a bit too far, but I don't know. I'm definitely pro-capitalism. I don't think people have to believe in God. That's a choice. You have your free will to do so. You should be objective and rational within your decision making to the best of your ability. Women's right to choose, good. Immigration, good. I don't know. Don't see anything wrong with that as a person.
Okay. So you just think maybe objectivism takes self-interest too far?
Yeah, maybe a little bit. Some things I think maybe not realistic or practical, but I'm definitely not a communist for sure.
Okay. So let's see, self-interest. So what have you read by Ayn Rand? Just to give me a sense of your context of knowledge, have you read her before, some of her works?
Atlas Shrugged, but that's really it. And maybe not the most comprehensive engaged when I was reading it, but it wasn't bad. I think I understood the point. I definitely think innovative people could go on strike like that, and
plot spoilers, by the way, for anyone listening, there might be plot spoilers here.
Spoilers count for an epic. It's pretty much an American classic, right? Over the past 50 years.
Well, yeah, I think it is, but there's still many people, including people listening here, who might not have read it yet. So I'm curious to hear an example of how you think it might take self-interest too far, if that's something you want to go into.
Well, I think that price equation does reasonably I think I kind of agree with him that evolutionarily we probably have an interest to be altruistic in some cases, and you can definitely maximize utility too much at other people's expense too and do great harm. And I think it takes a lot of wisdom to be self-aware to maximize your own utility when that utility can only be maximized or pursued at the expense of others. And it's really just that. Maybe I have a bad interpretation of it, but that's something I personally value. I think that's part of what makes a good decision and what does not make a good decision.
Whether it maximizes utility,
or I think a lot of people try to maximize some form of utility, right? You can describe I think utility can also be defined as personal happiness or enjoyment in some cases. And in pursuit of happiness, enjoyment, utility, whatever, sometimes it happens at the expense of others, and you know, it can be the magnitude can vary greatly, right? You know, it could just be like, you know, slightly, you know, costing someone like maybe 10 seconds of their time to the extreme of like ending lives or multiple lives, right? And I think there's a wisdom in decision making that, you know, maybe some people use objectivism to make their decisions, but they also are using it to justify things that might be causing harm to other people, and that's just them being inauthentic. But you know, I think we have to always be aware of that when with our choices.
Okay. I'm interested in an example where you think this might happen. I think a lot of times what people think are examples of putting other people's interests first, or being altruistic or self-sacrificial, are actually not examples of that. For example, if you risk your life to save a drowning spouse, I think many people would say that's a self-sacrificial or altruistic thing to do. Maybe you would say that. I don't know. But I would say that could be a very egoistic, self-interested thing to do, because your spouse is a very high value to you in your life, and you would be miserable without that spouse. So you might rather die than live on without her. So I don't know if that example, what you think of that, but I'd be interested to hear an example where you think like what objectivism would say is self-interested is different than what you would say is self-interested, if you can think of any.
I can't really think of one off the top of my head. I don't know. Is chat like got any opinions or? But no. It's just I just think that there's awareness. I'm not trying to criticize. You know, I'm just like directly. You know, I'm not trying to come up with you know, like a trolley problem style argument to go for or against. You know, it's more just you know, like your opinion, because obviously you're educated in this, right? You have a PhD.
Yes, in philosophy, not in objectivism, but just in philosophy in general. I've studied objectivism a lot, but there's not even such a thing right now as a PhD in objectivism. But there's a PhD in philosophy, which I have, and I've studied objectivism on my own and also at the Ayn Rand Institute. They offer courses in it. So, I mean, I'm happy to hear objections or criticism as long as it's civil. But if you don't have any examples now, that's fine. But I guess if you are interested,
well, what about like
okay.
You know, like sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but like you know, just from the firm level, right? So like you know, there's certain companies that, you know, we have finite resources in the world, right? Like certain data, you know, like the data centers and how they consume so much water, and the water that is used to cool, you know, these, you know, high-powered servers. I think like they absorb a lot of heavy toxic metals in like the process or something. There's something with water where it's like very difficult to purify, and to get, you know, quality water, it's going to, you know, compete with like local populations in certain areas, you know, things like that. But from the firm's perspective, right, does the firm have like a moral obligation to consider that, even though because water's a finite resource, there's a zero-sum aspect. You know, the firm's supposed to, a company like you know, like what are the data center companies like you know, like SpaceX or something, you know, SpaceX with their XAI, you know, building like large data centers, and if they happen to be in, you know, populous areas, because it has those impacts, and water is a finite resource, you know, like, you know, like what would you say to that? You know, like, because it's it is imparting like a negative utility onto people, but in the pursuit of the company, it's going to help them profit, right? Like that, like I'm sure that people on the left are going to bring up this hypothetical. I'm just bringing it up in general, but and people on the left would obviously think that that's immoral, right? Like, does that make sense?
I think there is okay, so finite resources, that's one thing you mentioned, and I think there's nothing infinite. I think that's just a metaphysical principle, but I think the resources that are available to us is going to depend to a large extent on the state of our knowledge and technology, and there's not just a fixed sum of what you might think is a fixed sum of water, for instance, actually is more variable than you might initially think. Like all the water in the ocean maybe is not fit to drink right now in its current states, but if we have desalination plants, then we could convert it into drinkable water. And now all of a sudden there's way more resources available when it comes to water. So if human beings are free to innovate and produce new technologies, then I think the resources that become available to us are vastly greater than they otherwise would be. Now, I don't know if desalinating water is relevant in the case of data centers. Maybe it's not, but in any case, the amount of water available might vary a lot depending on whether people are free to invent new technologies, and also whether there are regulatory barriers against it. Like, I think many environmentalists would like us to go back to a more unimpacted planet, and many people see human impact as as destroying the environment, and they're not concerned. Human beings and their welfare is not the primary consideration. Alex Epstein, I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's done a lot of work in this area of environmental philosophy and the energy industry. So I think there's a lot of misinformation as well. That's another issue here. Just aside from having the right standard of value, like having the standard be human life and human flourishing as opposed to untouched nature or an unimpacted planet. That I think that's one area that is that could use a lot of improvements. I don't think it's a rational value to have in unimpacted planets or a planet untouched by human activity. I don't think that's a rational goal to strive for. But aside from that goal, there's also just the basic facts of the case. Like, are we facing catastrophic climate change? I don't think we are, if we are free to use technology and various energy sources to protect ourselves from any dangers.
I think that's interesting how you phrased that.
What's that?
No. So, like, the facing catastrophic climate change, because you qualified that with if we have the ability to innovate, right? So, like, so if that condition's not met, does that mean that it's catastrophic? I'm just curious, just by the way you were phrasing that.
Or at least very dangerous.
This is like, more if a clarity question.
Yeah, sure. Like if you're living in a third world country and they don't have, it's a pre-industrial country, then I think you are in much danger, both from the heat or from the colds. You don't have air conditioners, you don't have heaters, or maybe you do have, maybe your only source of heat is a fire, and you have to sit around the fire and take a risk on breathing in some dirty smoke. So I think that the more advanced your civilization is, the better you are able to deal with any dangers that nature throws your way. So I think we live a much more secure existence in an industrialized, modernized country, than if you're just living in sub-Saharan Africa, and you don't have any technology to spare you from the elements. So now I think if those countries like in Africa had much more freedom and a system of property rights where people could innovate and benefits, including intellectual property rights, like patents and copyrights, if people could benefit from their inventions and make profits, and there would be much more incentive to create new technologies. And if your earnings, your profits from your inventions are not taxed away by the government, I think there will also be more of an incentive to innovate. So if you have the right political and economic system in place, then I think you're much better equipped to deal with natural dangers or disasters. So whether or not you're facing a catastrophic or dangerous scenario, I think is in large part a function of how much freedom a society has. Does that answer? Or?
I think that is true to some extent. It's kind of like, it's the aspects of your society kind of define like the what capabilities you have.
Yeah, I think that's right. So, well, let's see. So, I don't know if I mentioned or maybe I should say more about the issue of property rights. So if in a given area, there's, at a given time, at least there's a finite amount of water available for various people to use, I think there needs to be a system of property rights in place to decide who has rights to what water. Sometimes the example of polluting rivers comes up, and people have even raised this to me on my live stream, and I say, well, the solution there, at least in part, the solution is to define who has rights to the river. So instead of leaving things as just commons, no one in particular has private ownership over the river, privatize the river. And then if someone pollutes upstream from your part of the river, and you can then sue them because it's their toxins. If someone is dumping toxic waste into the river and it's flowing down into your part of the river, and you want to fish there, and now you can't fish because the fish would be poisonous to eat, you could sue them, right? But if there's no system of property rights in place, if it's just available for anyone to do whatever they want, then I think that invites conflict. So with these data centers, I don't know much about it, but I think maybe at least part of the solution is it has to be defined, well, who has rights to the water in the area, whether it's a river or wells under the ground, reservoirs. And then if some company or other individual interferes with water that you have a right to, then you could sue them in court. So I think that's
I guess with that,
yeah.
I guess with that, it's so like what role does government play then? I'm not a huge fan personally, and like I'm not here to debate that, of like a large government system interfering with individual rights. That's just me personally. But for the property rights to kind of exist, right? We also need like a strong legal system. Like how do we draw the line of the role, like where government needs to enforce these things for the individual and where it doesn't? I'm curious where you think there.
Well, I think maybe part of the answer, at least, is a use principle or a labor principle. Like John Locke had this idea that you gain rights over something if you mix your labor with it. That was the phrase he used. So if there's a patch of land and it's just wild land, weeds or flowers or grass growing on it, it might not have any value, but if you now plow that land and you sow some seeds and you you harvest the crops months later, you've done some work to improve the land and make it valuable, then you gain title over it. And I think it makes sense to have a kind of first come, first served, or first rights, first to get there. Something like this happened with the Homestead Act, I believe, in the 19th century as the American colonists were moving west. If you were the first one to stake out an area of land and start farming the lands, then if you did that for a number of years, I don't know exactly what the details of it were, but you would gain a deed or a title to that land. And so maybe something like that could work with water as well. If you're the first person to locate a water source and then you start using it in a way that makes that water of value to you, you now get claim to that water, or at least part of the water. Like if you fish on a certain section of the river, maybe you could claim that section of the river for yourself, and the next person who moves out has to claim another section of the river if they want a piece of it. I'm not exactly sure on how all the details of it would work, but
well, yeah, that, I guess, I mean, in that division, like, so what if there's two parties and they're trying to claim both parts of the river? Does it come down to force, right? Does there need to be a third party that uses force to, ensure that whoever claims it first doesn't get their land stolen or their claim stolen, or does it resolve by whoever's just stronger gets the resource at the end in a conflict? I guess that's more what I'm asking. Like, when things go awry and the conflict arises, like, how do we resolve that? It's because, like, government does fulfill that role too, right? Like, that's why there's a justice system, and we have the ability to sue, and the courts will enforce and make sure that conflict can be resolved. But it can be extreme, right? Like, it could be extreme as, like, and crony as, like, a North Korea, or it could be, like a kangaroo, like, not well enforced, but, or it could be, like a state of, like, functional anarchy, right? Like, there's obviously a spectrum of, like, required enforcement needed for some rights, right? Like, but we have to draw a line. I'm just curious, how do you think we, like, just your opinion, how you think we should draw those kind of lines?
I oppose anarchy. I think there should be a government, including a court system. So the basic functions of governments are police, military, and courts, and they all deal with force. So police protect you from domestic force, like robbers or rapists, murderers. And then the military protects you from foreign force, other countries that might invade and enslave your population. And then the court system is a way of, a mechanism through which people can peacefully settle their disputes instead of resorting to force. So all three functions, police, military, and courts, deal with extracting force from society. So if you have a dispute with your neighbor or some company over a water source, and you both think you should have the right to use it exclusively of the other party, then I think you should take that to the courts and settle it peacefully there, rather than resorting to force and just have a kind of might makes right system. I think it's in everyone's interest to have a peaceful solution rather than a coercive one. I mean, that's just in broad terms how I think it should work. But the details of it, like, I don't know that I would have much to say about that. But there might be principles, like I was saying, first person to get there and use it and turn it into some kind of value resource has the title to it. I don't know if there's a better system than that, but maybe that would be one principle that the courts could use to determine who has rights. And if one party can prove that they were the first to use it, then maybe they should get the title. And then that could be enforced So from that point, like once the court has reached that decision, assuming they've decided that one party has a right, then if any other party tries to infringe on their right, they could then be prosecuted, sued, or something.
Okay, so yeah, so there is a state, like I saw that you didn't agree with anarchy. Like, I don't think anyone rational really agrees with anarchy because there's so much problems with the lack of order. So there's a basic system of order, and it's just the mechanisms within that minimum requirement state to properly serve, a few first principles of justice, like where you say that they're, like whoever lays claim there first, should be entitled to that claim, right? And they would, enforce that principle to ensure that order is maintained.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a caveat in Locke about this. He says, as long as there's enough and as good left for others. So if we imagine like a desert island case, it's a small island and there's only one coconut tree on it, and the coconuts are the only source of food. And you're the first guy who gets there on the island, and you gather up all the coconuts for yourself. And then someone else arrives on the islands, and does he have any title to the coconuts? Well, I think this is a case where the issue of rights doesn't really apply. So I think rights like only apply when there's peaceful coexistence possible two people in a long run kind of way. But if you're in a survival situation where you have to, the only way for you to survive is to take someone else's stuff, then I don't think that's a context in which rights apply. A lifeboat case is another case like this. Like if you're on a lifeboat, or the lifeboat can only hold one person, there's two people treading water next to the lifeboat, and they can fight over it, and they can try to force the other person off of it in order to get it for themselves. And that's justified, I think, morally. But this is not a case where rights apply. I don't think one person can say they have the right to it. But if there's enough and as good left for others, like if there are multiple lifeboats available and there's two people and there's two lifeboats, then and one guy gets the one lifeboat the first, I think you could say, well, he does have a right to it, and the other guy can take the other one. Or if we're talking about homesteading lands, if there's, just a huge thousands and thousands of miles of prairie, and you cultivate one little spot of it, 1 acre, well, there's plenty left for other people to get their own piece. If there weren't, if there were only 1 acre, and then I don't think you would have a right to it. If you're having a right to it, excludes the possibility of anyone else surviving. But I take it that's what we're talking about in these kind of cases. It's not like either you live or the other person lives, but they both can't live. In the normal course of events, you don't have to survive at somebody else's expense. You can survive in harmony with other people. And if that's true, then I think that is a case where you can define rights and say who has a right to what, at least partly based on this principles of who was the first to use some lands or some other source of potential value. But if we are talking about an emergency kind of case where it's either you live or someone else's live, then that's just a case where I don't think rights apply. I'll pause there.
Yeah, no, I think, it's like, for the sake of, just our little chat, it was definitely more within just peeling apart like the edgelord case, I guess, like the real edge case where, it, would be, at the cost of someone's life, and like, I just was trying to unpack that. But yeah, no, so like, yeah, sometimes rights do have to be, ignored in certain cases for, I don't want to say the greater good. I feel like that's the wrong way of phrasing it, but you get what I mean, right?
Well, I wouldn't say they should be ignored. I would just say they don't apply. I think rights only...
Suspended, sorry. Ignored was definitely the wrong phrasing.
I don't even know if I would use suspended. It's just that there are certain cases where rights don't apply. Like animals, for instance. I don't think animals have rights. Now, some people do, and maybe they become vegan as a result. But I would say the issue of rights doesn't even come up in the context of animals. So there's no issue of violating an animal's rights, or maybe to take a less controversial example, the rights of the planet. Like just take an inanimate object like dirt.
Right, something without consciousness. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, but in like in the context of like the decision makers in the finite lifeboats, right, where there's not enough for everyone to go around. I think that's more interesting, just from like a thought experiment kind of thing. I don't know. I hope I never have to face that, right? Like, I hope you don't either.
A case where there's not enough to go around. Well, I mean, there's. So, what is a case? Well, I've talked about some cases like that with the lifeboat. There's not enough lifeboats for everyone. That's a case where there's not enough to go around. And hopefully, we never have to be in that kind of scenario. But the kind of cases you were talking about, like with the data centers and the water, I don't. But it
can provide like negative utility, like in reality for people, right? Like there is economic costs. Some of these areas, people, like with the fracking, right? Like some people, like they turned on their water, and they no longer have like drinking water out of their faucet, where some areas do, right? Like I don't think there's any perfect solution to, fixing it that fits everyone's needs, but, there are issues for people. There can be real issues. That's why I think it is, important to make the best rational decision that you can.
So fracking, I would recommend Alex Epstein on that. I don't know much about it, but, I think if it's true that fracking results in damaging people's drinking water, then I think those people whose water is damaged could sue, at least if the water is private. Now, I think maybe part of so right now we have public utility companies. So I don't think the water or the electricity companies are fully private. I think sometimes they have a monopoly, like a state or government granted monopoly. Yes. And I
was about to say the same thing. It's like yes, it is a state granted monopoly.
Yeah, and I don't think it should be. I think it shouldn't. I don't think the government should be involved. As you mentioned before, I think the only proper functions of governments are ones that deal with force, like police, military, and courts. But water supply is not among that, or electricity. I think those should be private, part of the free market. And if there is a private market in water, then I guess a water company will have a contract with its customers, and if some fracking company comes in later, and as a result of their fracking they start interfering with the water supply that this company was using to supply its customers, then I guess the water company, if they were there first, would have title to it, and then could sue the fracking company for damaging its resource. So I guess that's how it would be handled, or should be handled. So the people wouldn't have to just live with dirty drinking water, assuming that's what happened as a result of the fracking. They wouldn't have to live with it. They could sue the fracking company who got there second and doesn't have a claim over the water source.
Yeah, I guess I'm not arguing the fact that they can't sue, right? But they did suffer a harm, right, as a result of someone's actions.
Yeah, well, that's just a metaphysical fact. You can't get away from that, no matter what political system you have. Anyone can choose to be irrational and violate other people's rights and steal from other people or murder other people.
True.
No
I'm not
to...
saying it's like just like as a I don't want to say a moral consideration, but should the magnitude of such be minimized in pursuit of self-interest?
Should the magnitude of
such possible harms be minimized in the pursuit of self-interest?
Well, I think it would be minimized. Like I think if you have so if your goal is egoism or self-interest, a system in which you can best promote your own life, I think what you should do is set up a system of freedom where people are not coerced by the government or each other. I think that's the kind of system which is most conducive to each individual's flourishing or well-being or happiness. And so I think you'd be less likely to get harms like polluting your water source or theft or murder or any harm. I think is going to be minimized if you have a system of political freedom. I think. I mean, if there's a reason not to think that, I would be interested to hear what the reasoning is. But I think everyone would be better off with a system of freedom and capitalism.
No, I'm more saying from like a normative perspective. Like, should that be a requirement for pursuing self-interest? To what degree? Not like as a result of like a state of freedom that we do minimize the harms, but like should it be considered normatively?
Okay, just a second. I want to take a quick look at the chat.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Let's see. There's several here from John Wayne. One here from Nick. PVM Corp has a couple. Okay, and let me just take a look to see. I don't see any voicemails or other people who have tried to call in. Okay, so could you restate your last question again?
Oh, sure. I more meant when in pursuance of self-interest, should we have a normative consideration where when you're making decisions, you should also consider minimizing harm to others? Actually, the follow-up, I think, like what you described reminds me of like Adam Smith, to be honest, like where, in pursuance of self-interest, we do generate, a natural net benefit.
Mm-hmm. But maybe where I would differ from Smith is that I think benefiting yourself should be the goal. And if you benefit others, that's a nice byproduct. But it shouldn't be
right?
I'm not sure I would use that term, but a nice side benefit if you benefit others, but benefiting others shouldn't be your goal. Whereas maybe for Smith, he thinks self-interest, it's not moral in its own right. Maybe, I don't know if he was altruist or Christian, but I don't think he saw self-interest as a moral good.
Yeah. Or sorry.
Go ahead.
No, yeah, like he's obviously known for Wealth of Nations, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, but in his personal life, he wrote another book called like The Theory of Moral Sentiments, and it was a critique on Kant, I think. And I'll be honest with you, I'm probably gonna butcher this, but one of the principles was like an idea of sympathy that, I guess in modern terms would be more associated connotatively with empathy, but it was that like idea of reciprocity to generate these things, like under a state of freedom, pursuing your own self-interest, that generated like a net benefit, right? Like, you know, he used these arguments to justify like why free trade is good, right? Like between nations when they were protectivist, very protectivist in like the 1700s.
Yeah, mercantilists, protectionist. I just pulled up this blurb of Theory of Moral Sentiments. So I guess he thought there was a harmony of interests between the individual and society at large. When the individual pursues his own interest, he ends up benefiting society or others. And here's one thing in this. I'm sharing it on the screen. Listed under the key concepts, there's one for self-interest in the greater good. It says that explores how individual self-interest, when guided by moral sentiments, can paradoxically serve the broader good of society. I don't know if I would say it's paradoxical. I think maybe should be expected. It's not some kind of paradox.
Was that AI generated, the paradoxical?
That is part of the AI. No, actually, it is not. It's not labeled as an AI overview. Sometimes it does that. I don't know what the source of this is, but
I think paradoxical might be a little bit extreme.
Okay. Okay. Well, anyway, he probably, I'm guessing he had a different view of self-interest than I do, or that objectivism does. I would doubt that he saw it as a moral good, and as the highest moral good, not just a moral good. But anyway, you asked before, in pursuing your self-interest, should you consider harm to others? I think sometimes, at least in some contexts, you should consider others' rights, because I think it's in your own interest to respect others' rights, and you're harming others.
Kind of like if we want to have rights, we got to respect each other's rights.
Yeah, if you want rights, if you want your own rights respected, then you can only, to be consistent, you need to respect others. I don't think it's consistent to say only my rights should be respected. So, yeah, you should consider. Now, harm, I think harm can be I think it's too vague to serve as a standard of what should, like, what if I harm someone by frowning at them? Should that be illegal? What kind of harm are we talking about? I think to have an objective principle, we need to define it in terms of physicality. So Ayn Rand talks about the initiation of physical force as being evil. That provides a clear standard of when you've crossed the line, when you physically interfered with someone else's person or property. Like if you punch them in the face, you've done physical harm, as opposed to if you just frown at them, maybe you've caused them to feel bad, and you could call that psychological harm. But maybe what causes one person to feel bad doesn't cause another person to feel bad. Maybe some people are more sensitive than others, and I don't think it's a valid principle of that you could organize society around, that you shouldn't harm others. Now, maybe it's a valid moral principle. Even there, I would question it, but certainly not as a political principle. I don't think it works as a political principle to say harm is something that should be outlawed. I think it should be put more in terms of initiating physical force. I think that's more clear, more objective. But
I would totally agree with that. Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a magnitude aspect, right? Like not all harm is obviously equal, right? Like murder is not the same as like slapping someone in the face, right?
Yeah, that's true. And but even psychological harm, I think, like I could, what if I say something and it offends people? Like all the things on my background, many things on my background here. Like I say, I think atheism is good, and that I have altruism and faith I have in the bad category. Maybe that annoys some people. Have I caused people harm? Maybe I've made some people upset. Or Israel, as someone called in about Israel, and I have that in the good category. And someone earlier called in, and he thought that was, I don't know if it hurt his feelings, but maybe it did, or if not him, maybe it hurt somebody else's, or maybe someone else is offended by it. So if you just say, but I think it's true. What I have on my background, I think I put things as I see it. What I think is true. So even if it causes some harm in the form of hurting some people's feelings or getting them upset, I don't think that it certainly shouldn't be the only consideration in how one conducts themselves. I mean, I could consider it, and maybe I might decide in certain contexts, like if I'm going to, let's say I go to church with someone, and not that I don't regularly do that, but maybe I have a friend who is somewhat religious, and that person invites me to church, and for some reason I decide I want to support my friend and go along with him or her, in one case at least. I'm not going to stand up in the middle of the church sermon and say, there is no God, faith is irrational, altruism is evil. I would do some harm in that case. I would really disrupt their service, and I guess in a way that violates the rights of the people there, because they go there on the understanding that they can have their peaceful events and not be disrupted. But also morally, I don't think it's an appropriate context to make a statement like that. But here on my own live stream, I can say some things that might not be good to say in some other context. So harm, I think it's one consideration in harm to others. One thing to consider, but I don't think I would put it as a blanket rule that if you're, okay, now I'm sharing the screen I want to share. If you're pursuing your interests, should you consider harm to others? I guess yes, at least sometimes, but if you are considering harm, that doesn't necessarily mean you should stop doing something, because maybe the harm is good or justified. If it's self-defense, I think is a very clear case. If I punch someone who's trying to mug me on the street, I'm doing harm to him, but I think it's good in that case. In pursuing my interest, actually, you might demand that I do harm to others. Fighting a war of self-defense, that's another case.
I think that was well put. I think, just resonating off, like Adam said, there is I think like theory of moral sentiments does consider reciprocity, maybe not in the same phrasing as like a silver or golden rule, but it describes the principle and implies that as an aspect of morality.
Okay. So I think I think let's wrap up this call soon, and we could just end on.
Sorry, I've got to get going soon.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate your calling in. The golden rule, I think that's it's certainly better than other things in the Bible, like love your enemy. It's I think is terrible advice. But if there's also something like the golden rule, so the Bible, I think maybe it's just a mixture of some good advice, a lot of bad advice, and I think there's some sense to the golden rule, reciprocity.
Yeah, before we leave, do you think the phrasing matters? So go to the silver rule, like do not do unto others that you wish wouldn't be harm to yourself. Do you think that matters if you turn it from a positive to a negative? And then I gotta go.
Okay, I haven't thought about that. I haven't even heard that term, the silver rule. I have heard the actual rule, but I haven't heard it called the silver rule. So don't do unto others as you would not have done to you.
Or wish that would happen, or if like, if I don't want that, you don't want something to happen to you that sorry, I'm like butchering the phrasing. I'm getting tired of myself. But yeah.
Well, so sometimes
it's from Confucian. It's in the Analects.
Okay. Sometimes people raise sadomasochism as an example, a counterexample to this. Like, what if I really like being hurt physically? Does that mean I should hurt others physically? Well, maybe the golden rule
there's an
says,
episode of Rick
you
and
should.
Morty on that one.
And I don't know if we put it in terms of the silver rule. Say you don't want others to respect your rights. Does that mean you should not respect others' rights? I'm not sure that would follow. So, but maybe it works like in many contexts. But you could find certain, perhaps fringe cases like sadomasochism where it would not be a good idea to implement these rules. But I haven't thought much about this, so I don't have a well worked out view of the extent, the possible limits of the goodness of such rules. I do think justice is good. Like, justice is rationally evaluating people, as opposed to not judging. Like, judge not that ye be not judged. I think that's bad. Another part of Christianity I think is very bad. I think it's important to judge people and act accordingly, and judge them by a rational standard, by a pro-life standard. But that raises a lot of issues. What exactly is a rational standard? What is a pro-life standard? And but let's not get into all that right now. Let's wrap this up. And thank you again for your call, Michael. I do appreciate it.
No, you're welcome. This was fun. Thank you.
Sure thing. All right.
Have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye. Okay. Let me come back to the chat. Read some of these. I didn't see a voicemail from anybody. Who was trying to call in before? Okay, a lot of chats here from John. Oh yeah, here's the one about history of philosophy. Aaron says, yes, of course. This was somewhat thinly veiled criticism of your style. Before, Aaron said, should one be effective in debate? So that was a thinly veiled criticism of my style of debate, I guess. You don't like my style of debate. I agree with your views. I just wish you'd represent them more confidently, he says. Okay, well, I guess if you want to elaborate on that, you can. It doesn't look like you're still here. That was from a long time ago. But people have different points of view. Some people, they like a more aggressive, combative type of debate. I don't know if that's what you mean here, or if you have if there's something else that you have in mind. But if you want to talk about it, you can elaborate. I'm open to feedback within limits. I mean, if I think someone is just being rude and they're not providing feedback in a constructive way, they're just trying to attack me with, and not have the criticism be in service of doing something better, then I might just ignore the person or block them. But if it's done constructively with some civility, then I'm happy to hear your feedback. And I'm not equally confident about everything that I discuss. So, like I was having a discussion about Israel with a caller earlier, and I said at certain points, well, I don't know. I'm not an expert on the issue, and you might want to consult someone else like Yaron Brook, who knows a lot more about it than I do, but I'll do what I can here. So I try to proportion my level of confidence to my level of knowledge. I think it's good to do that, though. So, not sure what you mean here, but again, you can elaborate if you want. All right, here's one about taxes. I talked some about taxes earlier. Nick says, I think you should try to figure out a way to encourage viewers to like, subscribe, and share. The poll has 27 votes, but you only have 9 likes. Okay, maybe I should just mention it. Please like the stream if you like the stream. And consider sharing and subscribing. I appreciate that as well. Maybe I should do that more often. Just invite people to help promote the stream by liking, subscribing, and sharing. Thanks for that suggestion, Nick. Let me take a look at my subscriber counter, see if anyone else subscribed. Oh yeah, it's up to 1146 now. Thank you, whoever that was. It's the highest it's ever been. 1,146 subscribers. So, all right. I appreciate Nick's comments. Yeah, I don't know if I don't want to be too pushy about asking for subscribers, but I can also be too negligent and not do it enough. And maybe I haven't been doing it enough. Maybe there's a Goldilocks amount, and I can get better at finding what that is. Maybe you could incorporate it into the background, says Nick. Yeah, maybe. Sometimes people have a animated graphic that shows up that says like and subscribe. Click on the bell. Thanks for that suggestion. Sometimes I think it's good to just let people on their own decide to do it, and maybe it might mean more if people just do it without me prompting them to do it or reminding them. So maybe I'll have more loyal subscribers and fewer unsubscribes later if I just leave it to people to do it on their own. But I'm not sure about that. There might again be a Goldilocks issue here. Do you know Charles too? I know of him. I've seen his YouTube channel. I don't watch it. At least not now. I've seen some of his videos in the past, but I haven't kept up with his channel. I'm glad you mentioned W.T. Jones's History of Philosophy, History of Western Philosophy. I also read it at the recommendation of Dr. Peikoff, and it was excellent. Reading Will Durant now for large-scale overview. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's very... Well, he did... Will Durant wrote The Story of Philosophy, which is a 1-volume work, but he also wrote The Story of Civilization, which is an 11-volume work. I guess that's the one you mean, since you say large-scale overview. And I've read that too. I think it's great. I wrote an article about it, published in the Objective Standard many years ago. But that's not just a history of philosophy. That's a history of civilization. So it does cover philosophy, but it also covers many other things. Politics, art, literature, religion. All right, John has some criticisms of Nate Silver, it looks like. Okay. I am not familiar with Nate Silver. I've just heard his name, and I know he runs some polling or prediction website, but I don't have a personal view on how reliable those are. If perfect competition was real, objectivist ideas and intellectuals would be allowed into universities. PVM Corp asks, was it the steam engine that propelled civilization forward and gave them the ability to have more free time? Or was it the invention of the washing machine? Well, it was both. All those innovations, both of those innovations propel society, propel civilization forward and give people more free time. John says, I have a MeHD in objectivism. Water can be cleaned. It's literally just running water over a heat sink or metal in a pipe or tube. I haven't followed the controversy about data centers. I've heard about it, but I haven't looked into it. Nick says, being able to build stronger buildings protects you from severe weather. Yes. And advances in building technology can also help prevent earthquakes from toppling buildings. Like if you have more flexible building materials, then I guess the materials can absorb the shock of an earthquake better than if the building materials are very rigid. Okay. And that catches me up on the chat. All right. I'm going to end the stream. Thank you, David, for the one super chat today. $10. Okay, well, I don't know when the next time I'm going to stream is. It used to be every 5 days. But now that I am also streaming on TikTok, that changes my normal schedule for YouTube. So I don't have a normal schedule now. So as I was saying in the beginning of the stream, I'm weighing the different values I get on the different platforms. I've been getting a lot more viewers on TikTok than on YouTube, but I'm getting more money on YouTube than on TikTok. But the amount of money also factors in here. So for the amount, I don't know how much money I would have to get on YouTube in order for me to make it worth continuing at the, for example, at the, once every 5 days rate. So that's just something I have to think about. And maybe one day I'll eventually do simultaneous streams on both platforms, but right now I think it might be better just to stick with one platform at a time. But maybe I'll try at least. See, I'm concerned that, a couple things. One is it might slow my computer down to be streaming on two platforms at once. Another is my attention. Like if I'm streaming on both, yet I'm taking all my callers from TikTok, maybe people and I'm not paying attention at all to YouTube, then maybe people on YouTube will be turned off by that and tune out. Or the reverse, if I'm paying attention to the people in the YouTube chat or people who call in to this number of my backgrounds and I'm ignoring all the people who try to contact me on TikTok, then maybe the people on TikTok will just tune out. So there's a finite amount of attention to give, and if I end up getting lower numbers on a given platform, maybe that'll, because I'm not giving that platform as much attention as if I were streaming solely on that platform, maybe that will send a negative signal to the algorithm to recommend my content less. So, and then if I get fewer viewers as a result, maybe it's a net loss. So maybe given the way the algorithm works, it's better to just focus on one platform at a time. I'm not sure, but I have many things to figure out here. So anyway, I do appreciate everyone who came by today or listens to this later. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for your likes and your participation in the chat or your calls. And I'll see you next time, whenever that is. Not sure when it is, but if you're subscribed, you'll more likely get a notification, especially if you hit that notification bell. Oh, I see. Last look at the poll. Turns out 30% of the people here said yes, they use TikTok. And 70% says no, they do not use TikTok. Okay. Thanks for your votes on that poll. Let me end that now. $27 votes. Okay. So, maybe check out TikTok if you're not already over there, or maybe if you are already on TikTok, you can follow my accounts over there. My account is Dan Norton11 on TikTok. So maybe I'll see you over there. All right. See you next time, everyone. Whether it's here, TikTok, or both. Where's my closeout stream? Here we go. Okay. See you later. Bye-bye.